My parents stood in court demanding that I pay child support for the baby my husband and sister had together. The court will side with us because she has got nothing but jealousy, my sister said, while holding my husband's hand. I simply smiled and said I do not need to prove my innocence. I just need to prove they are guilty too. Before I tell you how I sent my entire family to federal prison, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to be the villain in someone else's story just to survive. The sound of the gavel slamming against the mahogany block echoed through the Fulton County family court like a gunshot, but it did nothing to silence the wailing infant in the second row. That baby was the weapon they were using against me. I sat at the defendant table with my spine pressed against the chair, wishing I could turn off my hearing. My name is Nia, and at 33 years old, I was watching my life be dismantled by the people who were supposed to protect me. Mr. Sterling, the lawyer representing my husband Liam, adjusted his silk tie and pointed a manicured finger directly at my face. Your Honor, Ms. Brooks is a predator in a power suit. She is a forensic accountant who earns 7 figures, yet she has financially strangled her husband for years. She trapped Mr. Vance in a loveless marriage while she pursued her career, and now she refuses to support the biological child of her husband simply out of spite. I looked over at Liam. He was wearing the navy suit I bought him for our 5th anniversary. He hung his head pretending to be the brow-beaten husband, but I saw the smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. He knew exactly what he was doing. Beside him sat my younger sister Tanisha. She was dressed in a faded cardigan that was 2 sizes too big, clearly chosen to make her look frail and destitute. She rocked the crying baby, a child with pale skin and curly hair that looked nothing like our side of the family. Suddenly, Tanisha stood up, interrupting the lawyer. Her voice trembled with a performance worthy of an Academy Award. She is jealous, Your Honor. Look at her. She sits there in her designer clothes with her cold heart. She cannot have children, so she wants to starve mine. Liam chose me because I am a real woman. I gave him a family. Why should my baby suffer just because Nia is bitter? A gasp rippled through the courtroom. I felt the heat of 100 eyes burning into the back of my neck. Behind Tanisha, my parents, Patricia and Desmond, nodded solemnly. My mother clutched her Bible, murmuring loud enough for the press to hear that the Lord forgives sinners, but Nia needs to open her wallet to find redemption. They were not just spectators. They were cheerleaders for my destruction. Order in the court, the judge bellowed, but the damage was done. The narrative was set. I was the cold, wealthy, sterile career woman bullying her poor sister and husband. The pressure in the room was suffocating. The air smelled of cheap cologne and betrayal. I looked at the judge, then back at my family. They were so confident, so sure that my shame would make me write a check. They had no idea that I was not looking at family members anymore. I was looking at targets. The judge adjusted her glasses and looked down at me from the bench. Her expression was not one of sympathy, but of calculation. Ms. Brooks, she said, her voice echoing in the silent room. The court has reviewed the financial affidavits provided by Mr. Sterling. They indicate that your monthly net income exceeds $85,000, while Mr. Vance and Ms. Brooks, your sister, report a combined income of less than $2,000. Do you dispute these figures? I stood up slowly, smoothing the fabric of my white blazer. I could feel my mother's eyes boring into my back. I did not need to turn around to know what expression she was wearing. It was the same look she gave me when I got my first paycheck at 16. It was a look of hungry expectation disguised as maternal pride. Before I could answer, my mother, Patricia, leaned forward from the gallery. Her voice was a stage whisper, loud enough for the stenographer to catch. The Lord blesses those who give, Nia. You have been given so much. It is a sin to hoard wealth when family is in need. My father, Desmond, grunted in agreement. That is right, he said. Blood is thicker than water, girl. Do the right thing. I felt a wave of nausea roll through my stomach, but I forced it down. These were the people who raised me. They were sitting there publicly shaming me for not supporting the product of my husband, is infidelity with my own sister. They were not praying for my healing. They were praying for my checkbook. They looked at Liam, the man who had humiliated their daughter, and saw a victim. They looked at Tanisha, the sister who betrayed me, and saw a martyr. And when they looked at me, they saw nothing but an ATM machine. Mr. Sterling smirked, sensing victory. Your Honor, my client is destitute. He has been living in a one-bedroom apartment while Ms. Brooks resides in a $5 million estate in Buckhead. We are asking for an emergency temporary order. We need $10,000 today for immediate childcare expenses and housing security for the infant. The judge looked at me, waiting for an outburst. She expected the angry black woman narrative that Tanisha had painted so vividly on social media. She expected me to scream or cry or deny my wealth. I did none of those things. I looked at Liam, who was trying to hide the greed in his eyes behind a tissue. I looked at Tanisha, who was smirking behind the baby's blanket. Your Honor, I said, my voice steady and devoid of emotion. I do not dispute that I have the means. However, I request a continuance of 72 hours before any order is signed. Mr. Sterling jumped up. Objection, Your Honor. This is a delay tactic. The child needs to eat today. I turned my head slightly, locking eyes with Liam. My liquidity is currently tied up in international investments. I lied smoothly. I need 3 days to arrange the necessary cash flow to ensure the payments are sustainable. Unless, of course, you want a check that bounces. The judge considered this, then banged her gavel. Hearing is adjourned for 72 hours. Friday morning, 9 a.m. Do not be late, Ms. Brooks. I sat back down. They thought they had won. They thought I needed time to gather money. They had no idea I needed time to gather the noose. 3 months ago, my life was a spreadsheet that actually balanced perfectly. I was sitting in my corner office overlooking the Atlanta skyline, feeling the quiet satisfaction that comes from being at the top of your game. As the lead forensic accountant for the city's most prestigious firm, I made a living finding the money that powerful men tried to hide. I could look at a convoluted tax return and tell you if a CEO was siphoning funds to a mistress, or if a charity was actually a front for money laundering. I saw the patterns where everyone else saw chaos. I was the hunter. I never imagined I was about to become the prey. It was a Tuesday afternoon when the illusion of my control shattered. My assistant buzzed me, her voice tight with confusion. She said there was a process server in the lobby, and he refused to leave until he saw me personally. I told her to send him back, assuming it was a subpoena for one of my high-profile cases. A man in a rumpled jacket walked in and dropped a thick yellow envelope onto my mahogany desk. He did not make eye contact. He just mumbled, "Nia Brooks, you have been served," and walked out before I could even set down my coffee. My hands were steady as I reached for the letter opener. I had nothing to hide, so I had nothing to fear. I sliced open the seal and pulled out a stack of documents. The header stopped my heart cold. It was a lawsuit from a luxury interior design firm called The Gilded Cradle. They were suing me for breach of contract and non-payment. I scanned down to the total amount due and gasped. $52,000. I laughed out loud. It was a harsh, dry sound in the quiet office. $50,000 for a custom nursery suite. The itemized list read like a parody of wealth. A crib with 24-karat gold leafing, imported Italian velvet rocking chairs, a hand-painted ceiling mural service, hand-stitched organic linens from France. I did not have a baby. I could not have a baby. My infertility was a jagged scar that I carried silently, a fact that Liam and I had cried over years ago before we stopped talking about it altogether. The idea that I would order a nursery for a child that did not exist was sick. It had to be identity theft. Some criminal had stolen my social security number and was living a fantasy life on my credit score. I reached for my phone to call the fraud department of my bank, ready to unleash my legal team on whoever had done this. But then my eyes drifted to the delivery address on the invoice. It was not my address. It was not my office. It was a luxury apartment complex in Buckhead. Unit 4B. The address felt familiar, like a number I had seen on a caller ID once and ignored. I turned to my computer and pulled up my personal forensic tools. I typed in the address. It was a lease signed 8 months ago. The tenant listed was Liam Vance, my husband, but he did not qualify for an apartment like that on his salary. My eyes scanned to the CO signer line. The name glared back at me. Desmond Brooks. My father. The room started to spin. My husband had a secret apartment. My father had co-signed the lease. And someone was filling it with $50,000 of baby furniture using my name and my credit. This was not a stranger stealing my identity. This was an inside job. And I knew exactly who the baby was for. I walked out of my office into the humid Atlanta afternoon and got into my car. My hands gripped the leather steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. The drive to Buckhead usually took 20 minutes, but today it felt like a lifetime stretched into a single suffocating moment. I drove on autopilot, my mind racing faster than the engine. The numbers on that lawsuit burned in my memory. $50,000. My father is signature. My husband is name. It was an equation that resulted in only one conclusion: betrayal. The address led me to the Sovereign, one of the most exclusive high-rise buildings in the city. It was a fortress of glass and steel, the kind of place where rappers and tech moguls lived. Liam told me he was barely scraping by with his architecture firm. He complained about the price of gas. He let me pay the mortgage on our house because he said his cash flow was tight. Yet here he was listed as a tenant in a building where the HOA fees alone cost more than his car payment. I pulled into the guest parking lot and spotted it immediately. Liam is black Range Rover. I paid the lease on that car. I paid the insurance. He told me he was at a construction site in Midtown inspecting a foundation. He lied. Seeing his car there parked so casually in a resident spot felt like a physical blow to the chest. It was the first piece of tangible evidence that my marriage was a crime scene. I parked my car and walked over to his vehicle. I used my spare key to unlock the door. The interior smelled of his cologne and something else. Vanilla. Sweet and cloying. I opened the center console and began to dig. I pushed aside gas receipts and gum wrappers until my fingers brushed against cold metal. I pulled out a small Altoids tin. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was a black RFID key fob. He had hidden it. He knew what he was doing. This was not a mistake. This was premeditated. I took the fob and walked toward the glass doors of the lobby. The concierge smiled at me, assuming I belonged there because of my suit and my bag. I swiped the fob and the doors slid open with a soft hiss. I was in. The elevator ride to the 4th floor was silent and terrifying. I watched the numbers climb 1, 2, 3. With every floor, my stomach twisted tighter. I wondered what I would find. A mistress, a gambling den, a second family. The lawsuit said nursery furniture. That detail gnawed at me. A nursery. My father knew. He co-signed. My father who watched me cry after my 3rd failed IVF treatment. My father who told me that God had a plan for me. Was this the plan? The elevator dinged and the doors opened. I stepped into the hallway. It was lined with expensive art and plush carpeting that dampened the sound of my heels. I walked down the corridor until I found Unit 4B. I stood there for a long moment staring at the dark wood grain of the door. I could hear sounds coming from inside. It was not the sound of an illicit affair. It was the sound of domesticity, pots banging, a television playing a game show, laughter. I took a deep breath and held the fob up to the scanner. The light turned green, the lock clicked. I pushed the handle down and the door swung open. I was not just walking into an apartment, I was walking into the end of my life as I knew it. The air inside the apartment smelled like Sunday dinner. It was a rich, savory scent of roasted chicken and collard greens that instantly transported me back to my childhood kitchen. But this was not my mother's house. This was a $2 million penthouse paid for with money siphoned from my accounts. I took a step forward, my heels sinking into a Persian rug that probably cost more than my first car. The open concept living area stretched out before me, framed by floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the Buckhead skyline. My eyes adjusted to the light and my breath caught in my throat. It was like walking into a twisted mirror version of the life I had been trying to build for a decade. In the center of the room sat a white leather sectional sofa, draped with cashmere throws. Lying there, propped up by a mountain of silk pillows, was my sister Tanisha. She was not the struggling influencer I saw on Instagram begging for brand deals. She looked like a queen on her throne. And she was pregnant. Very pregnant. Her stomach rose like a dome under her tight dress, an undeniable testament to a life created behind my back. But it was not the pregnancy that stopped my heart. It was the man kneeling at her feet. Liam, my husband. The man who told me that morning he was too exhausted to talk. The man who claimed his architecture firm was on the brink of collapse. He was on his knees holding Tanisha's swollen foot in his hands. He was massaging her arch with a focus and tenderness I had not seen from him in years. He murmured something soft, and Tanisha threw her head back and laughed. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated triumph. I felt like I was watching a home movie of a stranger's life. Liam reached for a bottle of lotion on the coffee table. I recognized the brand. It was the expensive lavender cream I used. He was using my lotion to rub my sister's feet in an apartment leased in my name. The level of violation was so absolute it was almost clinical. Then I heard the humming, a low gospel tune coming from the kitchen island. I turned my head slowly. My mother Patricia was standing at the stove stirring a pot with a wooden spoon. She was wearing an apron over her Sunday best, looking for all the world like the matriarch of a blessed home. Beside her, my father Desmond was opening a bottle of wine. He poured a glass and handed it to my mother, kissing her on the cheek. They were all there. The entire cast of my life playing house without me. They had created a perfect little ecosystem, a sanctuary of warmth and family, an impending new life. And they had built it on the foundation of my credit score and my naivety. I stood in the entryway, clutching my forensic tools, invisible to them in their bubble of domestic bliss. I watched my father slice a piece of baguette and feed it to my mother. I watched Liam kiss Tanisha's ankle. I watched Tanisha rest her hand on her belly, her face glowing with the smug satisfaction of the chosen one. This was not just an affair. This was a replacement. They had auditioned Tanisha for my role and she had gotten the part. I was just the producer financing the show from the wings. The shock that had paralyzed me began to recede, replaced by the cold, hard clarity of a balance sheet that finally made sense. I stepped out of the shadows and let my purse drop to the floor with a heavy thud. The sound shattered their laughter like glass. Liam scrambled to his feet, knocking over the bottle of lotion. It spun on the hardwood floor, a dizzying sound in the sudden silence. Tanisha pulled the cashmere throw up to her chin, her eyes darting between me and Liam. My father froze with his wine glass halfway to his mouth. But it was my mother who moved first. Patricia wiped her hands on her apron and marched toward me, not with an apology, but with the righteous indignation of a general rallying troops. She stopped inches from my face, blocking my view of my husband and sister. "Nia," she said, her voice dropping to that low, dangerous register she used when I forgot my chores as a child. "Lower your voice. You are upsetting your sister. Stress is bad for the baby." "The baby?" I laughed, a sharp, jagged sound. "You mean the $50,000 nursery I apparently paid for, the baby my husband put inside my sister while I was working 80-hour weeks to pay off his debts." "Watch your tone," my mother snapped. "Tanisha made a mistake. She is young, she is fragile, she simply lost her way. You know how she is. She needs guidance, not judgment. And you are the oldest. You are the strong one, the successful one. God has blessed you with wealth, Nia. And to whom much is given, much is expected." Expected. I stepped around her, but she grabbed my arm, her fingers digging into my bicep. "Listen to me," she hissed. "This family stays together. We do not air our dirty laundry." Tanisha carried this burden because she loves you. She wanted to give Liam what you could not. The heir left the room. There it was, the weaponized infertility, the knife they had been sharpening for years. "What did you say?" I whispered. Patricia straightened her spine, her face a mask of pious cruelty. "Let us be honest, Nia. We all know the situation. You are barren. A man like Liam needs a legacy. He needs a son. You could not give him that. Tanisha could. She stepped up where you failed. She is doing this for the family. For you. For me." I looked at Tanisha. She was not crying anymore. She was watching me with a look of pure, unadulterated pity. "It is true," Nia. Tanisha said, her voice soft and sickeningly sweet. "We did it for you. We knew you wanted a baby. Now we can raise him together. Like a real family. You have the money. I have the fertility. It is a perfect arrangement." "You are sick," I said, backing away from them. "All of you." "We are practical," my mother shouted, dropping the whisper. "Liam loves you, Naya. But a man has needs. Would you rather he left you for a stranger? At least this way the child is blood. The child is family. You should be thanking your sister for making this sacrifice. You should be writing the checks to support this miracle instead of standing here judging us with your cold, empty heart." I looked at my father. He just poured more wine and looked away. That was his answer. He agreed. They all agreed. I was just the bankroll. Tanisha was the vessel, and Liam was the prize stud. The betrayal was not just physical, it was systemic. They had held a family meeting and decided my dignity was a fair price to pay for their comfort. "I am not paying for this," I said, my voice shaking with rage. "I am not paying for your miracle." "You will," Patricia said, her eyes hard as flint, "because you are the big sister, and because you are the only one with anything to lose." Liam stepped out from behind my mother, and the shift in his demeanor was terrifying. Gone was the cowering husband who had been caught red-handed. In his place stood the arrogant architect who believed he could design his way out of any structural failure. He placed a hand on my mother's shoulder, effectively silencing her. He looked at me with a calm that made my skin crawl. He did not look ashamed. He looked like he was pitching a concept to a client. "Nia, let us be logical about this," Liam said, smoothing the lapel of his shirt. He walked over to the kitchen island and poured himself another glass of the wine I had paid for. "You are a businesswoman. You understand assets and liabilities. Our marriage is an asset. We are a power couple. Your brand depends on that image of stability. Divorce is messy. It destroys net worth. It ruins reputations." I stared at him, unable to comprehend the level of delusion required to make this speech, while his pregnant mistress, my sister, sat 5 feet away. "Are you proposing a business arrangement?" I asked, my voice flat. "I am proposing a solution," he corrected, taking a sip of wine. "I never stopped loving you, Nia. But you and I both know there was a piece missing. A man has a biological imperative to leave a legacy. You built a financial empire, but you could not build a family. Tanisha is not replacing you. She is supplementing you, supplementing me." The word hung in the air like toxic smoke. He spoke about my sister as if she were an extension on a house or a new wing on a building. "Think about it." Liam continued, his voice taking on that persuasive cadence he used in boardrooms. "We do not have to split assets. We do not have to endure a public scandal. We can have it all. You keep your career, your status, and your big house. Tanisha moves into the guest wing. She raises the baby. I get my son. You get to be the mother figure you always wanted to be without sacrificing your billable hours. To the outside world, we are just a close-knit family supporting a single mother. It solves your problem, Nia, my problem." He was calling his infidelity and my infertility my problem. He was proposing a twisted, informal polygamy funded entirely by my hard work. He wanted to sleep with my sister under my roof, raise a child that was not mine, and have me foot the bill for the privilege of staying married to him. "And what if I say no?" I asked. Liam set his glass down. The charm evaporated instantly, replaced by a cold, hard stare. "Then you lose everything. I will file for divorce. I will demand half of your assets. I will tell the court you were emotionally abusive and neglectful. I will tell your clients you are unstable. And Tanisha will go on social media and tell the world how her rich sister tried to starve her and her baby. We will destroy you, Nia. Or we can be a happy family. The choice is yours. I looked at Tanisha. She was smirking again, rubbing her belly. I looked at my parents who were silent complicit in this blackmail. And finally I looked at Liam. He thought he had checkmated me. He thought my fear of scandal was greater than my self-respect. At that moment I knew I was not going to argue. I was not going to scream. I was going to burn their entire world to the ground, but I had to make them believe they had won first. The blinding Atlanta sun hit my face as I pushed through the heavy oak doors of the courthouse. I took a deep breath of the humid air, trying to expel the stench of my family as betrayal from my lungs. I did not look back. I knew exactly what was happening behind me. My mother was probably hugging Liam, praising him for standing up to me. Tanisha was likely checking her makeup, preparing for her next victim performance. They were celebrating a victory that did not exist. I walked briskly to the parking lot, my heels clicking a sharp rhythm on the pavement. I did not go to my car. Instead, I headed toward a nondescript gray sedan, parked in the far corner under the shade of an oak tree. The window rolled down as I approached, revealing the face of Marcus, my private investigator. He was a former detective with eyes that had seen too much and a silence that spoke volumes. "Get in," he said, his voice gravelly. I slid into the passenger seat and closed the door, shutting out the noise of the city. The interior was cool and smelled of stale coffee. Marcus did not waste time with pleasantries. He reached into the back seat and pulled out a thick black binder. He dropped it onto my lap. The weight of it felt substantial, like a weapon. "You were right," he said. "It is worse than you thought." I opened the binder. The first page was a summary of Liam's financials, or rather the lack thereof. My brilliant architect husband had not billed a client in 2 years. His firm was a shell company. The office address was a P.O. box in a strip mall. "Keep reading," Marcus said. I flipped the page. There were photos, grainy surveillance shots of my father Desmond meeting with a man in a parking lot. I recognized the man. He was a known loan shark in South Atlanta. My father was handing him an envelope. "Your dad has a gambling problem," Marcus explained. "He owes 6 figures. Liam took out loans in your name to pay off the vigorish. That is where your savings went. Not to bad investments, to bookies." I felt a cold rage settle in my chest. It was not the hot, frantic anger of the courtroom. It was something different. It was ice. It was clarity. For years I had blamed myself. I thought I was not supportive enough, not present enough. I thought my infertility made me defective. But I was never the problem. I was the mark. "And Tanisha?" I asked, my voice steady. Marcus sighed and tapped a section near the back of the binder. "She is not just a mistress, Nia. She is an accomplice. We found texts. She has been planning this for months. The baby was her ticket. She knew you would never let a child starve. She was counting on your guilt." I closed the binder. My hands were not shaking anymore. The sadness that had weighed me down for months evaporated, leaving behind a dangerous lightness. I looked at Marcus. "Do we have enough for the IRS?" I asked. Marcus smiled for the first time, a slow, predatory grin. "We have enough for the IRS, the FBI, and probably the Pope. They did not just steal from you, Nia. They stole from the government. That PPP loan Liam took out, it is fraudulent. He used your social security number. That is federal prison time." I looked out the window at the courthouse looming in the distance. Inside that building, my family was plotting how to spend my money. They thought I was weak. They thought I was broken. They had no idea I was holding the detonator. "Let us go," I said. "I have a lot of work to do in 72 hours." Marcus started the engine. "Where to, boss?" "To the bank," I said. "I need to make a withdrawal, and then we are going hunting." The drive home from meeting Marcus was a blur of adrenaline and calculation. I was no longer just the betrayed wife. I was a forensic accountant with a target. My first objective was to secure my base of operations. My home. The 5-bedroom estate in Buckhead that I had bought with my own money 3 years ago. It was my sanctuary, my fortress, or at least it was supposed to be. I pulled into the driveway, my tires crunching on the gravel. The house looked the same as always. Statuesque white columns, manicured hedges, the weeping willow tree in the front yard, swaying gently in the breeze. But something felt off. The blinds were drawn tight. Liam's car was in the driveway, parked at an angle, as if he had arrived in a hurry. My parents' car was there too. They had beaten me back from the courthouse. I grabbed my purse and marched to the front door. I did not bother with my keys. I had installed a state-of-the-art smart lock system 6 months ago. I punched in my code. 4 digits. My birthday. Access denied. The red light flashed aggressively. I frowned. Maybe I typed it wrong. My hands were shaking slightly after all. I took a deep breath, steadied my fingers, and typed it again. Slowly. Deliberately. Access denied. A cold knot formed in my stomach. I tried my backup code, the one I set for the housekeeper. Access denied. I pulled out my phone and opened the smart home app. I was the administrator. I controlled the system. Or I thought I did. The app loaded and a message popped up on the screen. User account disabled. Contact administrator. Liam. He had changed the codes. He had locked me out of my own house. The audacity was breathtaking. I pounded on the heavy oak door, my fist making a dull thud. Open the door, I shouted. Liam, I know you are in there. This is my house. Open the door. Silence. Then I heard movement inside. Footsteps approaching. The peephole darkened for a second, then lightened again. Someone was looking out. Go away, Nia. It was not Liam. It was Tanisha. Her voice was muffled by the thick wood, but the smugness bled through. Tanisha, open this door right now, or I will call the police, I warned, my voice rising. You do not live here anymore, she said. Liam said you moved out. He said you abandoned the marital home. Possession is 9/10 of the law, sis. And we possess the house. Now get off our porch before we call the cops on you for trespassing. Trespassing. On property I paid the mortgage for. On land where my name was on the deed. I stepped back, looking up at the facade of my home. It looked like a fortress, now impregnable and hostile. They were inside, eating my food, sleeping in my beds, plotting my demise. And I was standing on the welcome mat like a stranger. I reached for my keys to try the physical lock, but stopped. If they changed the digital codes, they probably changed the deadbolt too. Liam was an architect. He knew how to secure a building. He had fortified my own castle against me. Panic flared hot and bright. My laptop was in there, my files, my backup hard drives. Everything I needed to prove their fraud was locked behind that door. They were holding my life hostage. I looked around the neighborhood. Mrs. Higgins next door was watering her hydrangeas, watching me with curious eyes. I could not break a window. I could not kick down the door. Not without looking like the unstable, hysterical woman they claimed I was. I took a step back, my heels clicking on the stone porch. They thought this was a victory. They thought locking me out made me powerless. But they forgot one thing. I bought this house. I knew every inch of it, including the things an architect might overlook. I turned and walked back to my car, my head held high. Let them have the house for tonight. Let them feel safe behind their stolen locks. I did not need a key to destroy them. I just needed my brain, and that was the one thing they could never lock out. The heavy oak door cracked open, just a few inches held back by the security chain. I saw a slice of my mother's face through the gap. Patricia. She did not look apologetic. She looked annoyed, like I was a solicitor interrupting her dinner instead of her daughter trying to enter her own home. Mom, let me in, I said, pushing my shoulder against the wood. I need my things. I need my laptop. She did not budge. You cannot come in, Nia, she said. Her voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. Tanisha is sleeping. She had a very long day at court. The stress is bad for her milk supply. You know she is trying to breastfeed. We need absolute quiet. I stared at her through the crack. Breastfeed. My sister was in my house breastfeeding a baby that was allegedly fathered by my husband while my mother played guard dog at the gate. Are you insane? I asked, my voice trembling. This is my house, Mom. My name is on the deed. I pay the mortgage. I pay the electricity that is keeping you cool right now. Open the door. Patricia sighed, a long, suffering sound that I knew well. Always about money with you, Nia. Always about who paid for what. That is your problem. You think money buys you the right to disrupt a family. Tanisha is vulnerable right now. She is a new mother. She needs peace. And frankly, your energy is too aggressive. It is toxic. We cannot have that around the baby. Toxic. I was the one standing on the porch of my own home, locked out by the people I had supported for a decade. I was the one who had been cheated on, lied to, and humiliated in court. And I was the toxic one. I am not leaving until I get my laptop, I said, jamming my designer heel into the gap so she could not close it. Patricia looked down at my foot, then back up at my eyes. There was no warmth in her gaze. No maternal instinct reaching out to her eldest daughter. Just cold, hard calculation. If you do not remove your foot, I will call the police, she said. And I will tell them you are threatening us. I will tell them you tried to attack your sister. Who do you think they will believe, Naya? The crying new mother holding an infant, or the angry barren woman who just stormed out of court? The threat hung in the humid air, heavy and suffocating. She would do it. I knew in that moment with absolute certainty that she would send me to jail to protect Tanisha is comfort. She would watch me be handcuffed on my own lawn. Go to a hotel, she said, dismissing me. You can afford it. Go to the Ritz. Treat yourself to a spa day. Calm down. Maybe in a few weeks, when you are ready to apologize and accept your new role as an aunt, we can talk about letting you visit. But right now, this is Tanisha's sanctuary. She needs it more than you do. She kicked my foot, hard. A sharp pain shot through my ankle. I instinctively pulled back, and the door slammed shut. The deadbolt slid home with a final metallic thud that sounded like a prison cell closing. I stood there staring at the wood grain. My mother had not just chosen a side, she had evicted me. She had looked me in the eye and told me that my sister's need for my house outweighed my right to own it. She had weaponized my own success against me, using my ability to afford a hotel as justification for stealing my home. I touched the wood one last time. Goodbye, Mom, I whispered. You just made the biggest mistake of your life, and you did not even know it. I stepped off the porch and walked around the side of the house. The windows were dark, but I could hear the faint hum of the air conditioning unit running full blast. I paid for that AC. I paid for the electricity. I paid for the very air they were breathing. I reached the back patio. The French doors leading to the kitchen were locked, of course. But through the glass I could see my father Desmond sitting at the kitchen island. He was eating a sandwich, my sandwich, made with bread from my pantry and turkey from my refrigerator. He looked up and saw me. For a second I thought he would look ashamed. He was my father. He taught me how to ride a bike. He walked me down the aisle. But his eyes were empty. He stood up and walked to the door. He did not open it. He just stood there on the other side of the glass like a museum exhibit of a disappointment. Dad! I shouted, my voice muffled by the double-paned glass. Let me in. Please, I just need my laptop. I have client files on there. I could lose my license if I do not secure them. He shook his head slowly. Go away, Nia, he mouthed. I rattled the handle. Open the door, Dad. This is insane. You cannot steal my house. He unlocked the door then, but he did not step back. He filled the frame a wall of paternal betrayal. You need to leave, Nia, he said, his voice flat. We called the police. You what? I stared at him. You called the police on me, on your daughter, at my own house. You are trespassing, he said. Liam showed us the deed. His name is on it too. It is marital property. And since he is the primary resident right now and you have been absent, he has the right to determine who enters. He determined you are not welcome. If you do not leave before the officers get here, they will arrest you for domestic disturbance. Absent, I laughed a high hysterical sound. I was absent because I was working to pay off his gambling debts. To pay off your gambling debts, Dad. Do not think I do not know. His face twitched. A flash of fear, then anger. You do not know anything, he spat. You think you are so smart with your fancy degree and your big job, but you do not know how the real world works. Family protects family. And right now, you are the threat. You are the one trying to tear us apart with your greed and your jealousy. Greed, I whispered. I paid off your bookie last month. $5,000. Was that greed? He stepped forward, invading my space. You mention that again, and I will tell the police you hit me. I will tell them you pushed your elderly father. Who do you think they will believe? The respected community elder or the hysterical woman who just got sued for child support? I looked at his hands. They were clenched into fists. This was not the man who raised me. Or maybe it was, and I just never saw him clearly until now. He was willing to send me to jail to protect his secrets. He was willing to ruin my life to keep his comfortable. I heard sirens in the distance. They were coming. My parents had actually done it. They had weaponized the law against me. Fine, I said, backing away. You win for now. But remember this, Dad. When you are sitting in that kitchen eating my food and living in my house, you are not safe. You are just waiting. Because I am coming back. And when I do, I am not bringing a key. I am bringing a bulldozer. I turned and ran toward my car, my heels sinking into the soft grass of the lawn I paid to have manicured. I got in and started the engine just as the blue lights of a patrol car turned onto my street. I did not wait to explain. I drove past them, my heart pounding in my throat, a fugitive from my own life. I pulled my Mercedes into the valet circle of the St. Regis in Buckhead. My hands were still trembling from the confrontation with my father, but I forced them to still as I handed the keys to the attendant. I needed a sanctuary. I needed high thread count sheets and a locking door that my family could not breach. I walked into the lobby with my head held high, ignoring the fact that my designer suit was rumpled and my makeup was likely smudged from the humidity and rage. I approached the front desk. The receptionist was a young woman with a perfect bun and a smile that cost money. I slammed my platinum Amex onto the marble counter. It was a heavy metal card, the kind that usually commanded instant respect. One night, I said, my voice raspy, "The presidential suite. And I need a bottle of your most expensive bourbon sent up immediately." "Certainly, Ms. Brooks," she said, typing rapidly. She swiped the card. I waited for the familiar beep of approval. Instead, there was a harsh buzz. A red light flashed on the terminal. She frowned and swiped it again. Another buzz. "I am sorry, Ms. Brooks," she said, her voice dropping to a discreet whisper. "The card has been declined. It says report as stolen." I felt the blood drain from my face. Stolen. That was Liam. As my legal spouse, he had called the bank. He had reported my cards, my lifeline, as compromised. He was not just locking me out of my house. He was locking me out of my life. Try this one. I pulled out my Visa Black card, my backup. She swiped it. Buzz. Declined. And this one. I threw my corporate card on the counter. Buzz. Account frozen. The lobby suddenly felt very quiet. The guests behind me were shifting impatiently. I could feel their eyes burning into my back. I was the crazy woman with the declined cards, the fraud, the failure. The receptionist looked at me with pity. That was the worst part. It was not anger. It was pity. "Is there another form of payment you would like to try?" she asked gently. "Perhaps you should call your bank." I did not need to call the bank. I knew exactly who was on the other end of this transaction. Liam and my father were probably laughing right now, toasting with my wine in my kitchen, while they cut off my oxygen supply. They wanted me to beg. They wanted me to crawl back to that house and accept their terms because I had nowhere else to go. They forgot who I was. I was a forensic accountant. I spent my life tracking people who hid assets. I knew that digital money was fragile. I knew that systems could be manipulated. That was why I never relied solely on plastic. I took a step back from the counter. I bent down and unzipped my left boot. The valet looked confused. The receptionist looked alarmed. I reached into the hidden compartment I had built into the heel. It was a trick I learned from a client who ran numbers for the cartel. I pulled out a thick roll of bills, $100 bills, $5,000 in emergency cash, cold, hard, untraceable currency. I stood up and slammed the cash onto the marble counter. The sound echoed through the lobby. Cash. I said, my voice hard as diamonds. I am paying in cash. And I want my receipt. The receptionist stared at the money, then at me. Her pity vanished, replaced by a flicker of fear. She nodded quickly and began counting the bills. I watched her hands move. Liam thought he had trapped me. He thought he had cut my hamstrings, but he had only cut the leash. I was loose now. I was off the grid, and I had $5,000 and a night to plan his destruction. Room 402. Ms. Brooks, she said, handing me the key card with a shaking hand. Enjoy your stay. I took the key. I did not say thank you. I walked toward the elevators, leaving the whispers and the stares behind me. I was not just checking into a hotel, I was checking into my war room. I woke up to the sound of my phone vibrating off the nightstand. It was not a call, it was a relentless, continuous buzzing that sounded like a swarm of angry hornets. I reached for it, my eyes gritty from a sleepless night in the hotel bed. The screen was lit up with notifications, hundreds of them. Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, my personal inbox. I clicked on an Instagram notification that simply said, "You are evil." It led me to a video that had been posted 3 hours ago. It already had 50,000 views. The thumbnail showed my sister Tanisha. She was sitting in what looked like a makeshift nursery, but I recognized the curtains. It was the guest room in my house, the house I was locked out of. She was holding the baby close to her chest, tears streaming down her face. The caption read, "The truth about my billionaire sister." I pressed play. "Hey guys," Tanisha whispered into the camera, her voice cracking perfectly. I did not want to do this. I really did not. But I have nowhere else to turn. My sister Nia, the woman you all know as this big successful financial guru, just kicked me and my newborn son out on the street. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding against my ribs. She was lying. She was in my house. She is mad because my baby daddy is her husband, she continued, wiping her nose with a tissue. I know it sounds messy. It is messy. But we fell in love. And Nia, she cannot have kids. She has always been jealous of me because I am fertile. I offered to let her adopt him. I offered to share him. But she said if she cannot be the mother, no one can. She froze our bank accounts. She changed the locks. She told us she hopes we starve. The comments were scrolling by so fast I could barely read them, but the ones I caught were venomous. Cancel her. What kind of monster starves a baby? Boycott her firm. This is why you cannot trust these corporate women, they lose their souls. It was a masterclass in manipulation. Tanisha knew exactly which buttons to press. She played the struggling young mother against the cold, barren career woman. She weaponized my infertility and turned it into a motive for cruelty. She did not mention the fraud. She did not mention the stolen identity or the $50,000 nursery. She just painted a picture of a villain so cartoonishly evil that the internet had no choice but to hate me. My phone buzzed again. A direct message from a client. "Nia, I just saw the video. We need to talk about my portfolio. I cannot have my brand associated with this kind of drama." Another message. this time from a stranger. I know where your office is. Watch your back. I threw the phone onto the duvet. They were not just stealing my money anymore. They were salting the earth. They wanted to make sure that even if I won in court, I would have no life to go back to. Tanisha was burning down my reputation to keep herself warm. I walked to the window and looked out at the Atlanta skyline. It looked different today. Hostile. Thousands of people down there were watching that video right now, judging me, hating me. I felt a tear slide down my cheek, but I brushed it away angrily. Let them talk, I whispered to the empty room. Let them type. Tanisha just made a fatal error. She put her lies on the record. And the internet never forgets. But neither do I. She wants a show. I will give her a finale she never saw coming. My phone rang again, cutting through the silence of the hotel room like a siren. The caller ID displayed the name David Sterling. He was the managing partner at the firm where I worked. My stomach dropped. David never called before 9 in the morning unless a client was being raided by the feds or the building was burning down. I picked up the phone, my hands slick with cold sweat. Naya, we have a serious problem, David said. His voice was tight, professional, and completely devoid of our usual friendly banter. I just received an email. It was sent to the entire board of directors, the ethics committee, and human resources. It was sent from an anonymous Proton Mail account, but the contents are incredibly specific. I sat down on the edge of the bed, bracing myself. What does it say, David? It accuses you of embezzlement, David said. It claims you have been siphoning client funds into offshore accounts to pay for personal gambling debts and to support a secret drug habit. It includes screenshots, Nia, fake bank transfers, forged emails. It looks damning. They are saying you compromised the integrity of the firm. I closed my eyes. Liam. It had to be him. He knew the industry jargon. He knew exactly what buzzwords would trigger an internal audit. He was not just trying to divorce me, he was trying to nuclear bomb my career. If I lost my license, I lost my ability to earn. If I could not earn, I could not pay the lawyers. He was trying to bleed me dry before the fight even started. David, listen to me. I said, my voice steady despite the rage boiling in my gut. You know this is a lie. You know I am the one who catches the embezzlers. I do not join them. This is my husband. He is trying to destroy my credibility before our court date. I know that, David replied, his tone softening slightly. I know you, Nia. I know you are clean. But the board is panicking. They saw the video your sister posted. Now this. The optics are a nightmare. They want to suspend you pending a full investigation. They want to freeze your access to the system. I looked at my reflection in the hotel mirror. My eyes were dark, but my jaw was set. Liam wanted me to panic. He wanted me to waste my time and energy fighting a war on two fronts. He expected me to beg for my job. But what if I did not? What if I gave him exactly what he wanted? David, I set a plan forming rapidly in my mind. Do not suspend me. Fire me. There was a long pause. Excuse me? David asked, his voice confused. Fire me, I repeated. Do it right now. Send a termination letter to my work email. Make it harsh. Cite gross misconduct. Say I am being reported to the state board. Liam has my passwords. He is monitoring my inbox. I need him to believe he won. I need him to think I am destitute and powerless. If he thinks I have no income, he will get sloppy. He will stop hiding his tracks because he will think I cannot afford to chase him. You want me to fake fire you? David asked, the realization dawning in his voice. I am not just an employee, David. I am a silent partner. My equity is safe. You and I know that. But Liam does not. Let him think he cut my throat. I could practically hear David smiling on the other end. You are absolutely terrifying, Nia. All right. I will write the letter. It will be the most convincing termination notice in history. Just promise me when you take him down, you tell me the story. Consider it done, I said. 3 minutes later, a notification pinged on my laptop. Subject: Notice of Termination. I opened it. It was brutal. It stripped me of my title, my salary, and my dignity. It was a masterpiece of corporate rejection. I sat back and waited. Somewhere in my house, Liam was reading this same email. He was probably popping a bottle of champagne thinking he had just checkmated me. He had no idea he had just given me the ultimate cover. I was now a ghost. And ghosts can walk through walls that living women cannot. I stared at the termination letter on my screen and felt a cold smile spread across my face. It was a work of art. David had outdone himself. To anyone looking from the outside, it appeared I was finished, ruined, a pariah in the financial world. The letter cited gross negligence and ethical violations, invoking clauses that sounded terrifyingly final. But the truth was far more dangerous for Liam. He thought he was cutting off my income. In reality, he was just cutting off the only part of my wealth he could see. What my husband never bothered to ask during our 5 years of marriage was how I actually made my money. He saw the salary, he saw the bonuses, he saw the title of lead forensic accountant, but he never saw the equity. 7 years ago, when David started this firm, he did not have the capital to keep the lights on. I did. I had just closed a massive case for the Department of Justice involving a pharmaceutical Ponzi scheme. The whistleblower reward was substantial. I did not buy designer shoes. I did not buy a luxury car. I bought 40% of Sterling and Associates through a blind trust registered in Delaware under the name Nemesis Holdings. I was not just an employee. I was the silent partner. I was the one who approved the hiring of the very HR director who just processed my fake firing. I was the one who signed off on the quarterly dividends that funded the firm's expansion. My wealth was not dependent on a bi-weekly paycheck. It was built on ownership and accumulated capital. And because of the way I structured the trust, my name appeared nowhere on the public incorporation documents. To the world and to Liam, I was just a well-paid worker bee who could be crushed by a bad reference. To the bank, I was the queen. I picked up my burner phone and sent a text to David. Letter received. Oscar-worthy performance. Transfer my dividend payments to the Cayman account until further notice. He replied instantly with a thumbs-up emoji. The trap was set. Liam would access my work email, which he had undoubtedly hacked, and see the termination notice. He would log into our joint account and see the direct deposits stop. He would assume I was bleeding cash. He would think I was desperate. And desperate people make mistakes. They sign bad deals. They give up assets for pennies on the dollar. I walked over to the minibar and poured a glass of sparkling water. My hand was steady. Liam wanted to play chess, but he did not even know what pieces were on the board. He thought he had taken my queen. He did not realize I was the one designing the game. I was going to let him enjoy this victory. I was going to let him gloat to Tanisha about how he destroyed my career. I wanted him to feel safe. I wanted him to feel powerful. Because when men like Liam feel powerful, they get sloppy. They start spending money they do not have. They start leaving paper trails. And that was exactly when I would strike. I opened my laptop again. Not my work computer, but the personal encrypted machine I kept for my real business. I logged into the admin portal of my trust. The balance stared back at me. 8 figures, liquid, accessible. Liam was fighting for scraps of a salary I did not even need. I was fighting for total annihilation. I closed the laptop. Let the games begin. I drove to Greater Hope Baptist Church in a daze, seeking the one place that had always promised sanctuary. This was the church where I was baptized, the place where I sang solos in the Christmas pageant, and where I thought morality still mattered. Pastor Jenkins had known me since I was 5 years old. Surely a man of God would see the evil in what was happening. Surely he would stand against adultery and theft, even if the perpetrators were my own flesh and blood. I walked past the church secretary, Mrs. Gable, who had always greeted me with a hug and a peppermint candy. Today she did not even look up. She kept her eyes glued to her computer screen, her lips pressed into a thin line of disapproval. The air in the waiting room felt heavy with judgment. That should have been my first warning, but I was too desperate for an ally to see it. I knocked on the heavy oak door of the pastor office and entered. Pastor Jenkins was sitting behind his massive desk. He did not stand up to greet me. He did not offer a prayer or a word of comfort. He just looked at me over the rim of his glasses with a look of profound disappointment. "Nia," he said, his voice deep and rumbling. "We have been praying for your soul." "Thank you, Pastor," I said, sinking into the chair opposite him. "I need help. My husband and my sister have taken my home. They are lying about me. They have locked me out, and my parents are helping them." He held up a hand, stopping me cold. "We have heard the full story, Nia. Your parents, Desmond and Patricia, were just here. They spent over an hour with me. They are heartbroken. They told me how you have allowed money to harden your heart. They told me how you have turned your back on the biblical principles of family and forgiveness." I stared at him. My heart was hardening. I was the victim here. "They are lying," I insisted. "Liam is an adulterer. Tanisha is a thief." "Watch your tongue, daughter," he snapped. "Your parents are pillars of this community. In fact, they just demonstrated their faith in a way that moved me deeply." He gestured to a piece of paper sitting on his desk. It was a check. I recognized the bank logo immediately. It was from an emergency investment account I had set up for my parents years ago, an account I funded entirely. "Your parents just donated $25,000 to the building fund for the new youth center," he said, his eyes gleaming with a mix of piety and greed. "They said they wanted to sow a seed of peace for their family. They are good people, Nia. They are trying to cover the sins of their children with charity." I felt like I had been punched. They used my money. They stole $25,000 from me to buy the church silence. They bribed God with my earnings. "That is my money," I whispered. "It is family money," he corrected smoothly. "And it has gone to a righteous cause. Now here is what you are going to do. You are going to go home. You are going to apologize to your husband for this spirit of rebellion. You are going to embrace your sister and that innocent baby. The Bible says, 'Honor thy father and mother.' It does not say honor them only when you agree with them. You need to submit, Nia. Submit to your family and stop this war before you destroy yourself." I looked at the man I had trusted my spiritual life to. I saw the calculation in his eyes. He did not care about justice. He cared about the new roof. He cared about the donor list. My parents had bought his allegiance, and he had sold me out without a second thought. I stood up. My knees were shaking, but my voice was steady. "You are right, Pastor. The money is gone. Consider it a severance package. Because I am done with this church. And I am done with people who use scripture to justify abuse." I walked out of the office, leaving him sitting there with his stolen check. The last safety net was gone. There was no higher power coming to save me. I was completely alone. And in that silence, I finally heard my own voice loud and clear. My phone buzzed with a text from Liam. "Meet me at Java & Co. in 20 minutes. Do not be late." It was a command, not a request. I considered ignoring it, but curiosity won out. I needed to see his face. I needed to see the arrogance one last time before I erased it. I put on sunglasses to hide my swollen eyes and drove to the coffee shop. It was a trendy spot in Midtown, the kind of place where aspiring screenwriters typed on MacBooks and influencers took selfies with their lattes. Liam was sitting at a corner table looking relaxed and prosperous. He was wearing a new linen shirt and sipping an espresso. He did not stand up when I approached. He just gestured to the empty chair opposite him. "Sit down, Nia," he said. I sat. I did not order anything. I just folded my hands on the table and waited. "You look tired," he observed with fake sympathy. "This has been hard on you, I know. But it does not have to be this way. I have drawn up a proposal, a path forward that allows everyone to win." He slid a manila envelope across the table. I opened it. Inside was a legal document titled Post-Nuptial Agreement. I scanned the terms. It was breathtaking in its cruelty. Clause 1. Nia Brooks agrees to maintain full employment and deposit 100% of her earnings into a joint account managed by Liam Vance. Clause 2. Nia Brooks grants Liam Vance exclusive use of the primary residence for the purpose of raising his child. Nia Brooks will relocate to a secondary property or rental unit approved by Liam Vance. Clause 3. Nia Brooks agrees to pay a monthly stipend of $10,000 to Tanisha Brooks for childcare services. Clause 4. In exchange for these concessions, Liam Vance agrees not to file for divorce and will publicly support Nia Brooks against any allegations of misconduct, thereby preserving her professional reputation. I looked up at him. You want me to be your bankroll and your scapegoat. You want me to pay you to live in my house with my sister while I live in a rental, and you call this winning? It is a fair trade, Liam said, leaning back in his chair. You get to keep your job. I saw the termination letter, Nia. I know you are under investigation, but I can fix that. I can write a letter to the board. I can tell them the accusations were a misunderstanding, a hacking incident. I can save your career, but only if you save my family. Your family, I repeated. Tanisha is my family. Not anymore, he said coldly. She is the mother of my son. That makes her my priority. You are just the wife on paper. And frankly, Nia, you should be grateful. Most men would have left you years ago. You are cold. You are obsessed with work. You are defective. I stayed. I am still willing to stay. But you have to pay the price of admission. Defective. The word cut deep, reopening the wound of my infertility. He was using my pain as leverage. He was betting that my fear of losing my status was greater than my self-respect. And if I sign this, I asked, my voice trembling slightly. Then the war ends, Liam said, smiling. We go back to being the power couple. Tanisha stays in the guest house. We raise the baby together. The internet forgets the scandal. You get to keep your fancy title and your social standing. And I get the life I deserve. The life you deserve. A life built on my sweat and my tears. A life funded by fraud and betrayal. He truly believed he was entitled to everything I had built simply because he was a man who could father a child. I need time, I said, looking down at the paper. This is a lot to process. You have 24 hours, he said, checking his watch. The court hearing is on Friday. If this is not signed and notarized by tomorrow noon, I am going to let Tanisha do another interview, and this time she won't be holding back. I nodded slowly as if defeated. He thought he had broken me. He thought he was looking at a woman who had lost everything. He did not see the fire in my eyes behind the dark glasses. He did not see the calculations running through my mind. I stood up, clutching the envelope. I will let you know, I said. Good girl, he said, taking another sip of his espresso. Do not disappoint me, Nia. I walked out of the coffee shop, the envelope burning a hole in my hand. He called me a good girl, like a dog, like a servant. He had just signed his own death warrant. He wanted a war. I was going to give him an apocalypse. I stopped halfway to the door. I could feel Liam, his eyes on my back, burning with arrogance. If I walked out now, he would ramp up the attacks. He would release more videos. He would ensure I never worked in this town again. I needed him to stop. I needed him to think he had won so he would stop looking over his shoulder. I turned around and let my shoulders slump. I forced my lower lip to tremble. It was a technique I learned from watching Tanisha my whole life. The art of weaponized fragility. I walked back to the table and sank into the chair. Liam raised an eyebrow, his expression one of bored amusement. I cannot lose my license, Liam, I whispered, letting a single tear slide down my cheek. This job is all I have. If I sign this, will you promise to stop the emails? Will you tell the board it was a mistake? He pushed the pen toward me. Sign it, Nia, and the problem goes away. I will send a retraction letter tonight. We will say your account was hacked. But you have to sign. Now. I picked up the pen. My hand shook not from fear, but from the sheer effort of restraining my rage. I pressed the tip to the paper. I signed my name, Nia Brooks. It was a contract signed under duress based on fraudulent pretenses, but to Liam, it was a surrender treaty. He snatched the paper from the table the moment I lifted the pen. He blew on the ink and grinned. "Smart choice," he said. He did not even look at me. He pulled out his phone and hit speed dial. I stood up and walked away, but I lingered near the entrance hidden by a decorative fern. I needed to hear it. "Hey, baby," I heard him say, his voice dripping with triumph. "It is done," she signed. Yeah, she was crying. "She is broken, Tanisha. Completely broken. You can go ahead and order that new stroller, the one with the Italian leather. Yeah, put it on her card. She won't block it this time. She knows better." I walked out of the coffee shop and into the humid Atlanta heat. I did not wipe my face. I let the tear dry there, a crusty reminder of my performance. I got into my car and drove straight back to the hotel. I did not turn on the radio. I needed silence. I needed to think. When I entered my room, I locked the deadbolt and threw the "Do Not Disturb" sign on the handle. I went to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face, washing away the weak, compliant wife Liam thought he just conquered. I looked in the mirror. The woman staring back was not broken. She was focused. She was dangerous. I walked to the desk and opened my secure laptop. The screen glowed blue in the dim room. I cracked my knuckles. Liam thought he had secured his future. He had just handed me the time I needed to dig his grave. I opened my forensic accounting software and typed in his social security number. It was time to see exactly how my husband had been spending his free time. I sat at the small hotel desk and opened the proprietary software I used to hunt international money launderers. My husband thought he was clever because he knew how to hide a key fob in a center console. He did not realize he was married to a woman who could trace a digital footprint through 3 layers of shell companies before breakfast. I typed in Liam Vance followed by his social security number and hit enter. The screen filled with data streams. The first thing I looked for was income. Liam claimed his architecture firm was having a slow year due to supply chain issues. The data told a different story. Vance Architecture Group had not deposited a single check from a client in 26 months, not one dime. For 2 years, my husband had put on a suit every morning, grabbed his briefcase, and kissed me goodbye, only to drive to nowhere. He had been playing the role of a successful businessman while generating absolutely zero revenue. I felt a cold chill slide down my spine. If he was not making money, how was he paying for his Porsche lease? How was he paying for his golf club membership? I switched tabs to his credit report. It was a bloodbath. He had opened 5 credit cards in the last year alone, all sent to a P.O. box in Decatur. They were all maxed out, $100,000 in revolving credit debt. But that was just the surface. I dug deeper into the public records database. I found a lien against his name filed 6 months ago by a company called Shadow Creek Holdings. I recognized the name. They were a predatory lending outfit that operated out of a strip mall in Little Five Points. They charged 40% interest, and they did not sue you in small claims court when you missed a payment. They sent guys with baseball bats. Liam owed them $80,000. The picture was coming into terrifying focus. Liam was not just a cheater, he was a man standing on a trapdoor with a noose around his neck. He was desperate. That explained the rush. That explained the baby. He did not want a son. He wanted a settlement. He needed my money to pay off the sharks before they came for his kneecaps. Tanisha and that baby were not a new family. They were a human shield. He was using his own child as collateral against his bad debts. I printed the report. The pages were warm in my hands. I looked at the numbers again. Negative net worth, spiraling debt, unemployed. My husband was a fraud wrapped in an Armani suit. He had spent years making me feel inadequate because I could not give him a child while he was fundamentally failing to be a man. I placed the papers in a neat stack. I was going to enjoy watching him try to explain this math to a federal judge. I typed my social security number into the federal database, my fingers moving with the mechanical precision of a woman dismantling a bomb. I knew Liam was broke. I knew he was drowning in debt. Yet he was driving a Range Rover and living in a luxury high-rise. The math did not add up. Money does not appear out of thin air. It leaves a trail. And I was about to find the source of the river. The search results loaded, and the breath hissed out of my lungs. It was not a river, it was a flood. There, staring back at me from the glow of the screen, were 3 separate loans from the Paycheck Protection Program. The dates aligned perfectly with the start of the pandemic relief efforts. The total amount was staggering: $1.2 million. I clicked on the details, my heart hammering against my ribs. The loans were issued to a company called Brooks Vance Consulting, LLC. I had never created this company. I had never heard of this company. But there on the incorporation documents were the names of the officers. Liam Vance listed as Chief Executive Officer, Desmond Brooks listed as Chief Financial Officer, and Nia Brooks listed as the majority shareholder. I opened the loan application files. I felt a wave of nausea so violent I had to close my eyes for a second. At the bottom of the document, right next to the date, was my signature. It was not a digital stamp. It was a wet signature that had been scanned and uploaded. It was a forgery, but it was terrifyingly accurate. They must have traced it from our marriage license, or perhaps from the deed to the house. They had built a castle of lies on a foundation of my identity. They claimed this phantom company had 18 employees. They submitted falsified payroll records, forged tax returns, and fake bank statements. They had invented an entire business solely to defraud the federal government. And they had used my professional credentials, my clean record, and my good name to guarantee the approval. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. My father, the man who quoted scripture at breakfast and demanded respect as the patriarch, had conspired with my husband to frame me. They knew that if this house of cards ever collapsed, the federal agents would come looking for the majority shareholder. They would come for me. They had set me up as the fall guy from day one. While I was working late nights to build a legitimate career, they were using my name to commit a felony that carried a 30-year prison sentence. I looked at the disbursement dates. The money hit the account 2 years ago. That explained the sudden upgrade in my parents' lifestyle. The renovations on their house, the new Cadillac in their driveway. They had not been blessed by God. They had been funded by fraud. They were eating steak dinners paid for with money they stole using my social security number. I did not scream. I did not throw the laptop. I saved every single page. I downloaded the metadata showing the IP addresses used to file the applications. One was from my parents' home router. The other was from Liam's personal hotspot. They had left digital fingerprints all over the crime scene. They thought they were clever. They thought they were rich. They had no idea they had just handed me the keys to their jail cells. I opened a new secure browser window on my laptop. Liam thought he was a genius because he changed the keypad code on the front door. He forgot that I was the one who personally oversaw the installation of the entire security grid. I did not just have a user code. I had the master administrative root access hardwired into the server in the basement. I typed in the override command. The screen flickered black for a heartbeat, then burst into high-definition color. The live feed from my living room filled the monitor. It was like looking into a portal to hell. My pristine white sanctuary had been transformed into a frat house. Pizza boxes were scattered across the Italian silk rugs. Empty wine bottles lined the mantelpiece. And there, in the center of the chaos, was my family. They were not mourning the destruction of my marriage. They were throwing a victory party. Liam was standing on my coffee table holding a bottle of my 1996 vintage Bordeaux. It was a bottle I had been saving for our 10th anniversary. He was swaying slightly, his face flushed with alcohol and arrogance. He raised the bottle in a toast. To the golden goose, he shouted, his voice tinny through the laptop speakers. May she keep laying eggs until she dies. My father Desmond clinked his glass against the bottle. To the goose, he echoed, laughing. You played her perfectly, son. I thought she was going to fight back when you brought up the post-nup. But she folded like a cheap suit. She is weak, Tanisha chimed in from the sofa. She was not wearing maternity clothes anymore. She was wearing my silk robe. She had raided my closet. She looked at Liam with adoration. You broke her, Liam. You actually broke her. Did you see her face at the coffee shop? She looked like a kicked puppy. I zoomed in on the feed. My mother, Patricia, was sitting in my favorite armchair counting a stack of cash. It looked like the emergency money I kept in the wall safe behind the painting. She licked her thumb and flipped through the bills. God provides, she said, tucking the money into her bra. He provides for the righteous. Nia was getting too proud. She needed to be humbled. Now we have the house, we have the baby. And once she signs those papers, we have the income stream for life. I felt a cold numbness spread through my limbs. They were not just opportunists, they were parasites. They were feasting on the carcass of my life while I was still alive. They mocked my pain. They toasted to my humiliation. Tanisha stood up and did a little spin, the silk of my robe catching the light. This feels better on me anyway, she said. Nia never had the curves for it. She is too stiff, too cold. No wonder you needed a real woman, Liam. Liam jumped down from the table and pulled her into a kiss. It was sloppy and wet. I watched my husband kiss my sister in my living room while my parents cheered. It was grotesque. It was primal. I did not close the window. I did not look away. I moved the cursor to the bottom of the screen and clicked the red record button. I let the timer run. 1 minute, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. I captured every slur, every insult, every admission of guilt. They thought no one was watching. They thought they were safe in the castle they stole. They did not know the walls had eyes. I saved the video file to 3 separate cloud servers. I named the file The Party. It was not just evidence for a divorce court. It was a character witness for a jury. It showed the judge exactly who these people were when the masks came off. They were celebrating my demise. I was simply documenting theirs. I switched the camera feed from the living room to the hallway. Tanisha was moving away from the celebration. She looked over her shoulder, checking to see if Liam or my parents were watching her. Her face had lost the smug, triumphant grin she wore for her audience. Now she just looked anxious. She slipped into the powder room off the foyer and locked the door. She thought she was safe. She thought the bathroom was the one place in the house where she could have a private conversation. She was wrong. When I installed the security system, I put glass break sensors on every window, including the frosted one in that bathroom. Those sensors had high-sensitivity microphones designed to detect the frequency of shattering glass. But with a few keystrokes, I could recalibrate them to pick up the frequency of a human whisper. I adjusted the gain on my laptop and put on my noise-canceling headphones. The sound of running water filled my ears first. She was running the tap to mask her voice. It was an old trick. But my software filtered out the white noise, instantly leaving her voice crystal clear. "Pick up," she hissed. "Come on, pick up." There was a pause, then a sharp intake of breath. Finally. "Why haven't you been answering my texts?" I leaned in closer to the screen. Tanisha was looking at herself in the mirror, inspecting her teeth, but her eyes were frantic. "No, you do not get to be jealous," she whispered furiously. "You know why I am doing this. We needed a mark, and Liam is the perfect mark. He is desperate and he is dumb." My heart hammered against my ribs. A mark. She was talking about my husband. "He thinks he is the father of the century," Tanisha continued, letting out a cruel little laugh. "He is out there right now drinking wine and toasting to his legacy. He actually thinks the baby has his nose. It is pathetic. He has no idea." I froze. My breath caught in my throat. Liam was not the father. He was destroying his marriage, ruining his reputation, and committing fraud for a child that did not share a drop of his blood. "Listen to me," Tanisha said, her voice dropping even lower. "My sister just caved. She is going to pay for everything. The house, the lifestyle, the child support. It is all coming from her. We just have to play the part for a little while longer. Once the settlement is finalized and the cash is in my account, I will leave him. And then you and I can raise our son the way we planned. Our son. She was talking to the real father. Tanisha had not just betrayed me. She was running a con on Liam, too. She had found a man she actually wanted, probably someone broke or married, and she was using Liam to fund their future. It was a nesting doll of betrayal. I watched her hang up the phone and smooth her hair. She practiced her smile in the mirror, turning the predatory gleam back into the innocent young mother mask she wore so well. Then she shut off the water and walked back out to the party, ready to lie to the man she was using to destroy me. I sat back in my chair. The rage that had been fueling me shifted into something colder and more precise. Liam was a criminal, but he was also a fool. He was going to prison for a fraud that benefited a woman who despised him. I looked at the screen where Liam was still laughing with my father. "You poor idiot," I whispered. "You think you won the lottery. You just bought a ticket to hell. And I am going to be the one who reveals the winning numbers. But first I needed proof. I needed DNA. And I knew exactly how to get it." I drove to a rundown diner on the outskirts of Atlanta to meet the one person who had witnessed the slow rot of my family from the inside. Clara had been our housekeeper for 20 years. She was the woman who taught me how to tie my shoes and how to budget my allowance. She was more of a mother to me than Patricia ever was. 2 months ago, my mother fired her without notice. Patricia claimed Clara was stealing silverware, but I knew the truth. Clara had caught Tanisha trying to hack into my home office computer. Clara was sitting in a corner booth nursing a black coffee. She looked tired. Her hands, usually busy, were still. When she saw me, she did not smile. She just slid a heavy velvet pouch across the chipped laminate table. "I was wondering when you would call," she said, her voice raspy. "I saved these from the trash." I opened the pouch. Inside were receipts, pawn shop tickets, and a single diamond earring. "Your grandmother left you that jewelry," Clara said. "The vintage Cartier set, the one she wore to her wedding. She told me explicitly that it was for you, Nia. Not Tanisha, not your mother. You." I picked up the earring. It caught the light beautifully. "It is fake," Clara said. I looked at her sharply. "What?" "It is paste, glass. Your mother sold the real ones 6 months ago. She took the whole set to a fence in downtown. She did not even go to a reputable jeweler because she did not want a paper trail. She got 40,000 cash for a collection worth $500,000. I felt the air leave my lungs. My grandmother is legacy, the only thing I had left of the woman who actually loved me. Gone. She used the money to pay the deposit on that apartment for Liam. Clara continued. "I heard her bragging about it on the phone to your aunt. She said she was investing in the future of the family. She said you did not need diamonds because you had a career. She replaced them with high-end fakes she ordered from China. She was going to give them to you on your birthday and pretend she did not know. If you ever noticed, she was going to blame me. That is why she fired me, Nia. She needed a scapegoat in advance. The cruelty was so specific it was almost elegant. My mother had pawned my inheritance to fund her son-in-law's adultery. She had desecrated my grandmother's memory to build a love nest for my sister. And she planned to frame the woman who raised me for the crime. I gripped the fake earring until the post dug into my palm. My mother loved to talk about class. She loved to judge people based on their pedigree. But here she was, a common thief fencing stolen goods to support a lie. "She thinks she got away with it," I said, my voice quiet. "She thinks you are too busy looking at spreadsheets to look at your jewelry box," Clara said. "She thinks you are smart, Nia, but she thinks she is clever. There is a difference." I put the receipts and the fake diamond back in the pouch. This was not just theft, this was grand larceny. And because the value of the original pieces was over $5,000, it was a felony. My mother, the church deaconess, the pillar of the community, was going to prison. "Thank you, Clara," I said, standing up. "I will make sure you get your pension, and I will make sure she gets exactly what she deserves." I walked out of the diner into the bright sunlight. The pieces were falling into place. I had the fraud. I had the adultery. Now I had the theft. But I needed one more thing. I needed to secure the financial kill shot. I needed to own their debt. And I knew exactly where to go to buy it. I walked into the private wealth management wing of Sovereign Bank and felt the immediate hush of true power. The air conditioning was set to a crisp 68 degrees, and the carpet was so thick it swallowed the sound of my footsteps. This was a world my parents pretended to belong to, but I actually owned a key. My personal banker Julian stood up the moment I crossed the threshold. He did not look at me with the pity I saw in the eyes of the hotel receptionist or the judgment I felt at church. He looked at me with the reverence due a client who kept an 8-figure balance. "Nia, it is good to see you," Julian said, ushering me into his glass-walled office. He closed the blinds, a gesture of discretion that I appreciated. "I have the portfolio analysis you requested, but there is something else. Something that came up during the cross-reference of family assets you authorized." I sat down in the leather chair and crossed my legs. "Show me," I said. Julian turned his monitor toward me. The screen displayed a red alert banner over a property address I knew better than my own. 42 Oak Street, the house I grew up in. The house where my mother was currently plotting my destruction, and where my father sat drinking scotch he could not afford. "The mortgage is in default," Julian said, his voice low. "Your father has not made a payment in 6 months. The bank has already issued a notice of intent to foreclose. The auction is scheduled for 3 weeks from today." I stared at the screen. 6 months. That meant they stopped paying the mortgage exactly around the time they started planning Tanisha's baby shower. They had stolen $1.2 million in fraudulent loans using my name. They had fenced my grandmother's jewelry for $40,000 cash. And yet they had not paid a single dime toward the roof over their heads. "Where did the money go, Julian?" I asked, although I already suspected the answer. "We tracked the outflows," Julian said, tapping a few keys. "Luxury car leases, designer clothing boutiques, 5-star dining, and significant cash withdrawals at casinos in Biloxi. They are burning through cash at an accelerated rate, Nia. They are living like kings in a castle that is already burning down." The stupidity was almost impressive. My parents were so obsessed with maintaining the image of generational wealth that they prioritized a new Cadillac over their home equity. They were squatters in their own lives. They were terrified of losing face, so they decided to lose the house instead. And they thought that by taking my house, they could just swap properties before the sheriff came to evict them. "So the bank owns the paper?" I asked, my mind racing. "Technically, yes," Julian nodded. "The note is currently held in our distressed assets division. They are preparing to bundle it for sale to a collection agency." I leaned forward. "Do not sell it to an agency. I want it." Julian blinked. "You want to buy your parents' defaulted mortgage. I want to buy the debt I corrected. I want to be the one holding the lien. I want to be the one who decides when the sheriff knocks on that door. Can you make that happen today?" Julian smiled, a slow, professional smile. "With your liquidity, Nia, we can acquire the note by end of business. You will be the secured creditor. You will essentially own the deed until they pay you in full." "Which they never will," I said, standing up. "Draw up the papers, Julian. I am buying my childhood home, and I am going to turn it into a parking lot." I walked out of the bank with a lightness in my step. My parents thought they were untouchable. They thought they had time. They did not know that their landlord was coming home, and she was not looking for rent. She was looking for an eviction. I sat in Julian's office watching the printer churn out the contract that would hand me the keys to my parents' destruction. The paper was still warm when I picked it up. It was a standard assignment of debt agreement filled with legal jargon about liens and encumbrances. But to me it read like poetry. For the sum of $452,000, I was purchasing the right to foreclose on the people who birthed me. I signed my name with a flourish. Nia Brooks, not the daughter, not the sister, the creditor. "Congratulations," Julian said, sliding the countersigned copy across the desk. You are now the legal holder of the mortgage for 42 Oak Street. We will file the transfer with the county clerk immediately. It will be public record by tomorrow morning. But they won't check public records, I said, tucking the document into my purse. They are too busy spending money they do not have. They will not know until I tell them. Julian leaned back in his chair. You know, Nia, normally I advise clients to restructure debt to keep assets within the family. But in this case, I have to ask. Are you planning to offer them a payment plan? I laughed. A payment plan implies they have the intention to pay. My parents do not pay bills, Julian. They pay for appearances. They have not paid this mortgage in 6 months because they assumed the bank would be too slow to catch them. They thought they could float on the equity until they stole my house. No, there will be no payment plan. There will be a deadline. I checked my watch. It was 2 in the afternoon. My parents were probably waking up from their nap, getting ready to go to the country club for dinner. They were living in a fantasy world where consequences did not exist. I was about to introduce them to gravity. Is there anything else, I asked, standing up? Actually, yes, Julian said, his expression turning serious. We flagged another unusual transaction, a series of wire transfers from an offshore gambling site to an account linked to your husband's social security number. But the account is not at our bank. It is at a credit union in Buckhead. The amounts are small but frequent, 5,000 here, 3,000 there. It looks like he is trying to pay off a marker, but he is falling behind. That explains the desperation, I said. He is not just broke, he is in danger. He needs my money to save his legs. If he defaults on those kinds of debts, Julian warned, the collectors won't send a letter. They will send a message. Let them, I said, walking to the door. Liam made his bed. He can lie in it, or bleed in it. I really do not care anymore. I walked out of the bank feeling invincible. I had the deed to my parents' house in my bag. I had proof of their fraud on my laptop. And now I knew exactly why Liam was so terrified. He was being hunted by sharks, and I had just bought the boat. It was time to go fishing. I walked out of the pristine air conditioning of Sovereign Bank and into the sticky Atlanta heat, but I did not head back to the hotel. I had one more stop to make, and this one required a different kind of currency. Marcus. My private investigator had arranged a meeting with a man named Silas. Silas was not a banker. He was a broker for high-risk unsecured loans, which was a polite way of saying he managed the books for the biggest gambling syndicate in Georgia. The meeting place was the back room of a cigar bar in Buckhead. The air was thick with smoke and the smell of aged leather. Silas sat in a wingback chair, looking more like a university professor than a loan shark. He wore a tweed jacket and reading glasses, but the 2 men standing by the door with earpieces told a different story. Ms. Brooks, Silas said without standing. Marcus tells me you are interested in acquiring a specific portfolio. I sat down and placed my purse on the table. I am interested in the debt of Liam Vance, I said. I understand he has an outstanding balance with your organization. Silas chuckled. A balance is one word for it. Mr. Vance has a gambling problem that exceeds his architectural talents. He owes $250,000. He has missed his last 3 payments. My associates were planning to pay him a visit this weekend to discuss restructuring, usually involving a tire iron. I felt a flicker of disgust. My husband, the man who lectured me about budgeting for groceries, had gambled away $250,000 while I was working late. I want to buy the paper, I said. I want to become the holder of the debt, full assignment of rights. Silas took a drag from his cigar. Why would a nice lady like you want to buy bad debt? You know he cannot pay. I do not want the money, I said, my voice cold. I want the leverage. If I own the debt, I own the collection process. I assume your organization would prefer immediate liquidity over the hassle of breaking legs. Silas studied me for a long moment. Then he pulled a tablet from his jacket. He tapped the screen and turned it toward me. There was Liam's name, his social security number, and a list of bets on college football games that he had lost spectacularly. 300,000, Silas said. That covers the principal, the interest, and the inconvenience of losing a favorite punching bag. Done. I opened my laptop and initiated a wire transfer from my trust. The money moved instantly, digital numbers crossing the void. Silas watched his phone. A moment later, it pinged. He smiled. "Pleasure doing business with you, Ms. Brooks," he said, tapping a button on his tablet. "The debt is yours. We have marked his account as settled in our books. He is all yours. Do whatever you want with him." I walked out of the smoke-filled room into the daylight. The transaction was complete. I now owned my parents' mortgage, and my husband's gambling debt. I held the deed to their shelter and the marker on his safety. Liam had been terrified of Silas. He had been looking over his shoulder for months, waiting for the hammer to drop. He did not know that the hammer was now in the hand of the wife he betrayed. I got into my car and checked my watch. It was almost dinner time. My family was probably gathering around the table in my house, eating my food, oblivious to the fact that the walls were closing in. I started the engine. The financial noose was tight. Now it was time to collect the final piece of evidence that would hang them all. It was time for a home invasion. I waited in the shadows of the oak tree 3 houses down until I saw the tail lights of Liam's Range Rover disappear around the corner. They were heading to Chops for a celebratory dinner paid for with the last of the credit limit on my emergency card. I checked my watch. 7:30. I had 90 minutes before they finished their steaks and returned to gloat. I walked up the driveway of my own home, feeling like a burglar. The night air was thick with humidity and the sound of cicadas. I reached the front door and punched in the admin override code on the smart lock. 9900. It was a factory setting I had restored remotely while sitting in the bank parking lot. The mechanism whirred, and the deadbolt slid back with a heavy click. I slipped inside and closed the door softly behind me. The silence of the house was oppressive. It did not smell like my home anymore. It smelled of Tanisha's cloying vanilla perfume and the stale scent of formula. I pulled a pair of latex gloves from my pocket and snapped them on. I was not leaving fingerprints. I was a ghost. I moved quickly up the stairs, my footsteps silent on the runner. I went straight to the master bedroom. My bedroom. The bed was unmade, the sheets tangled. I fought back the urge to vomit. I did not have time for disgust. I walked into the ensuite bathroom. Liam's toiletries were scattered across the marble vanity I had imported from Italy. I found his hairbrush next to the sink. It was full of dark strands. I pulled a Ziploc bag from my purse and carefully removed a clump of hair, including the follicles. I sealed the bag and labeled it Subject A, 1 down. Now for the hard part. I walked down the hall to the guest room, which had been converted into the nursery. The door was open. The room was a shrine to excess. The gold leaf crib gleamed in the moonlight filtering through the curtains. I walked over to the diaper pail. It was a high-tech model designed to trap odors, but as I popped the lid, the smell hit me like a physical blow. I held my breath and reached inside. I grabbed a soiled diaper from the top of the pile. It was warm. The realization that I was holding the biological waste of the child my husband claimed was his made my skin crawl. I shoved it into a larger evidence bag and sealed it tight. Subject B. Suddenly I heard a noise downstairs, the beep of the front door lock. My heart stopped. They were back early. I had miscalculated. I heard heavy footsteps in the foyer and Liam's voice booming. I forgot my wallet. "I will just be a second." Panic surged through me, hot and electric. I was trapped on the second floor with a bag of evidence in my hand. If he found me now, the element of surprise was gone. The game was over. I looked around the nursery frantically, the closet, under the crib. No. He might come in here to check on the baby stuff. I heard his footsteps on the stairs. He was coming up. I looked at the window. It opened onto the roof of the back porch. It was a 12-foot drop to the garden. I did not hesitate. I unlatched the window and slid it up. The screen popped out with a soft snap. I climbed onto the sill just as the doorknob to the nursery began to turn. I dropped into the darkness, praying I would land on grass and not concrete. I landed hard on the soft earth of the flower bed, rolling instinctively to absorb the impact. The breath was knocked out of me, but I was alive. I scrambled to my feet, brushing mulch from my designer trousers, and sprinted toward the tree line. I did not stop running until I was safely hidden behind the massive oak tree that marked the property line. I watched the window I had just escaped from. A light flicked on. Liam appeared in the frame, looking around the room. He did not look out the window. He grabbed something from the dresser, probably his wallet, and the light went out. I waited until I saw his car pull out of the driveway again, before I moved. My heart was still racing, a frantic drumbeat against my ribs. I had the DNA, but I needed more. I needed the motive. I needed to know why Tanisha was so desperate to pin this baby on Liam when she clearly despised him. I made my way back to the house. This time I went for the back door. I knew Tanisha kept a diary. She had been journaling since she was 12, a habit encouraged by our mother to process her big feelings. She usually kept it in her nightstand. But Tanisha was also lazy. She had embraced technology. I slipped into the guest room again. The smell of the dirty diapers still lingered in the air, a pungent reminder of my earlier theft. I scanned the room. There on the nightstand next to a half-eaten box of chocolates was an iPad. It was Tanisha is. I recognized the rose gold case. I picked it up. It was locked, of course. But Tanisha was not a cryptographic genius. Her passcode was always the same. Her birthday. 4 digits. I typed them in. The screen unlocked. I scrolled through her apps, ignoring the social media and shopping notifications. I went straight to the Notes app. Tanisha used it like a diary, typing out her thoughts when she was bored or angry. The most recent entry was dated 2 days ago. The title was The Plan. I started reading. The words were a roadmap to her deceit. She detailed everything. The affair with a man named Marcus Sterling. Not just any man. A venture capitalist worth $50 million. A man with a wife, 3 kids, and a reputation to protect. He blocked me, she wrote. He said the baby was a mistake. He offered me $10,000 to get an abortion. 10,000. That is an insult. I am worth more than that. My son is worth more than that. I read on, my eyes widening with every line. She described how she targeted Liam, how she seduced him not out of passion but out of necessity. Liam is an idiot, she typed. He actually thinks he is special. He thinks I look at him with love. I look at him and I see a safety net. He is broke, but Nia is rich. If I hook him, I hook her money. And once the paternity is established, once he signs the birth certificate, he is legally on the hook. Even if he finds out later the court won't let him off easily. She had planned it all, the timing, the seduction, the emotional manipulation. She knew Liam was weak, she knew he was desperate for validation, and she played him like a fiddle. But the real bombshell was at the bottom of the note. A screenshot of a text message conversation with Marcus Sterling. I will ruin you, she had texted him. I will tell your wife. Try it, he replied. I have lawyers who will bury you, and I have proof you were sleeping with your brother-in-law at the same time. Good luck proving paternity. So she chose the path of least resistance. She chose Liam, because he was the easier mark, because he was connected to me, and because she hated me enough to enjoy destroying my life in the process. I took photos of every screen with my burner phone. I exported the notes to my secure cloud. I had the motive, I had the confession, and I had the name of the real father. Tanisha had not just built a trap for Liam, she had built one for herself, and I was about to spring it. I sat in the sterile waiting room of the private genetic laboratory, tapping my heel against the linoleum floor. The air smelled of antiseptic and quiet desperation. This was not the kind of place where happy families came to learn their ancestry. This was where people came to confirm their worst suspicions, or in my case, to secure their ammunition. I had paid an exorbitant rush fee to get the results in 24 hours. Money was bleeding out of my accounts at an alarming rate between the mortgage purchase, the debt acquisition, and now this. But I viewed it as an investment. The return on investment would be my freedom. A technician in a white coat walked out holding a sealed envelope. She looked tired. She did not smile. She just verified my ID and handed me the package. I did not open it immediately. I walked out to my rental car and sat in the driver's seat. The envelope felt heavy in my hands, though it contained only a few sheets of paper. It held the truth that would shatter my family's entire reality. I slid my finger under the flap and tore it open. The sound was loud in the quiet car. I pulled out the report. My eyes scanned past the technical jargon, the LOTI markers, and the probability indices. I went straight to the bottom line. The conclusion: probability of paternity 0.00%. I stared at the number. 0. Not a maybe. Not an anomaly. A mathematical certainty. Liam Vance was not the father of Tanisha's child. The baby that had been used to bludgeon me into submission, the miracle that my mother claimed was God's will, was a stranger to my husband. I did not laugh. I did not cry. I felt a cold calm settle over me like a blanket of snow. For months they had tormented me. They had called me barren. They had said I was less of a woman because I could not do what Tanisha had done. Liam had looked me in the eye and told me he needed a legacy. He had destroyed our vows for a legacy that did not exist. He was raising another man's child. He was going to prison for a fraud he committed to support a baby that shared none of his DNA. The irony was so rich, it tasted metallic in my mouth. Tanisha had played him perfectly. She had found the most gullible man in Atlanta and wrapped him around her finger. And my parents were co-conspirators in a lie that made fools of them all. I placed the document on the passenger seat next to the iPad screenshots and the loan shark contracts. It was a beautiful collection of evidence. Each piece was a nail in their collective coffin. I ran my hand over the paper, smoothing a small wrinkle. I imagined the look on Liam's face when he saw this. I imagined the silence in the courtroom. It would be the moment the air left the room and never came back. I started the engine. I had everything I needed. The investigation was over. Now it was time for the execution. I put the car in gear and drove toward my lawyer's office. My family wanted a reckoning. I was about to deliver it. And it was going to be 0% mercy. The conference room at Thorne and Associates was colder than a morgue. That was fitting because I was there to arrange a burial. Mr. Thorne was not a divorce attorney. He was a shark in a three-piece suit, a former federal prosecutor who specialized in white-collar crime. He did not care about custody battles or emotional distress. He cared about wire fraud, tax evasion, and money laundering. And I had brought him a feast. I watched him flip through the pages of the dossier we had spent the last 6 hours compiling. It was 500 pages thick, a heavy brick of black and white evidence that detailed every single financial crime my husband and father had committed in the last 2 years. Thorne stopped at page 214. It was a copy of the PPP loan application for Brooks Vance Consulting. He tapped the signature line with his gold pen. "This is excellent work, Ms. Brooks," he said without looking up. "You have the IP addresses tracing the application to your parents' home Wi-Fi. You have the bank records showing the funds were used for personal luxury vehicles and gambling debts, not payroll. And you have the affidavit from the handwriting expert confirming your signature was forged. This is not a lawsuit. This is a federal indictment wrapped in a bow." I nodded. I felt a strange sense of detachment. I was looking at documents that would send my father, the man who taught me to fish, to federal prison for a minimum of 10 years. I was looking at proof that would put my husband in a cage until his hair turned gray. "Is it enough?" I asked. Thorne closed the binder. The sound echoed in the silent room. "It is more than enough. The IRS does not have a sense of humor about pandemic fraud. And the FBI takes identity theft very seriously, especially when the victim is a high-net-worth individual with a security clearance. Once we hand this over, there is no taking it back. The machine starts, and it does not stop until someone is in handcuffs. Are you ready for that?" He was giving me an out, a last chance to show mercy. I thought about the text messages from Tanisha. I thought about my mother blocking the door to my own home. I thought about Liam proposing a sick arrangement where I financed his affair. They had shown me no mercy. They had tried to destroy my life, my career, and my sanity. They did not just want my money, they wanted to break me. I am ready, I said, my voice steady. File it. But not yet. Thorne raised an eyebrow. You want to wait. I want to bring it to court, I said. I want to hand it to the judge myself. I want them to see it coming. If we file it now, they might get a warning. They might run. I want them sitting in that courtroom thinking they are about to get a check. I want to see the moment they realize their lives are over. Thorne smiled. It was a terrifying expression. You are a dangerous woman, Ms. Brooks. I will have the exhibits marked and ready for transport. We will notify the special agent in charge at the Atlanta field office to be on standby near the courthouse. When you drop this hammer, the feds will be waiting at the door to pick up the pieces. I stood up and smoothed my skirt. The binder sat on the table like a loaded weapon. I had the DNA. I had the debt. I had the fraud. The trap was set. All I had to do now was lure them in. I walked out of the office and into the elevator. I had one more phone call to make. It was time to tell Liam he had won. I sat in the dim light of the rental car and stared at the contact name on my phone screen. Hubby. I had not changed it yet. It was a relic from a life that felt like it belonged to a different woman. I took a deep breath, summoning the character I needed to play one last time. I needed to be the broken wife, the defeated woman who just wanted the pain to stop. I dialed the number. Liam answered on the second ring. He did not say hello. He just laughed, a low, satisfied sound that made my skin crawl. Well, 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 he said. Look who finally decided to pick up the phone. I was about to call Tanisha and tell her to schedule another interview. She was thinking about going on a podcast this time. Please do not, I said, forcing a wobble into my voice. I gripped the steering wheel tight to keep from screaming. You win, Liam. I cannot take it anymore. The emails, the news crews, my clients leaving. You destroyed me. I am ready to sign. I heard the clinking of ice in a glass. He was celebrating already. I told you, Nia. You are smart, but you do not have the stomach for a street fight. You are soft. So you agree to the terms. 10,000 a month. The house. The public apology. Yes, I whispered. I agree to everything. But I have one condition. Liam sighed, loud and dramatic. You are in no position to make demands, Nia. It is not a demand, I said quickly. It is a request. My reputation is in tatters. If we just sign this in a back room, people will think I bought my way out of trouble. They will think I am guilty. I need redemption, Liam. I want to do this in court tomorrow. In court, he asked, suspicious now. Yes, I want to stand before the judge and publicly agree to support Tanisha and the baby. I want it on the record that I am stepping up for my family. I want the press to see us reconciling. If I'm going to pay for your life, I want my dignity back. There was a long silence. I held my breath. I was appealing to his vanity, to his narcissism. He wanted to be the man who tamed the shrew. He wanted an audience. I could practically hear his grin through the phone. You want a show? He said. Fine. We will give you a show. We will go back to court tomorrow. You will admit you were wrong. You will sign the papers in front of the judge, and Tanisha will be there to accept your apology. It will be perfect. A real Kodak moment. Thank you, Liam, I said, my voice flat. You have no idea how much this means to me. Just make sure the check clears, sweetie, he said, and hung up. I lowered the phone and let out a long, slow breath. He took the bait. He was so blinded by his own ego that he did not see the trap snapping shut around his ankle. He thought he was walking into a coronation. He did not know he was walking into an execution. I looked at the passenger seat, where the stack of evidence files sat thick and heavy. The DNA results, the bank records, the forged loan documents. I had not bought my dignity back. I had bought a front-row ticket to his destruction. I started the car. I had one more stop to make before tomorrow. If I was going to be the villain in his story, I needed to look the part. It was time to shed the last skin of the dutiful wife. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror in the hotel suite. The fluorescent light hummed above me, casting long shadows across my face. I looked at the woman in the reflection. She looked tired. She looked soft. She looked like a wife who had spent years trying to please a man who hated her. That woman could not walk into court tomorrow and execute her own family. That woman had to die so I could survive. I reached into my bag and pulled out a pair of shears I had bought at the drugstore. My hand was steady. I grabbed a handful of my long hair. Liam loved it long. He said it made me look feminine. He said it made me look submissive. I closed the blades. The sound of the hair being severed was like paper tearing. A thick lock fell into the sink. It felt heavy and dead. I did not stop. I cut and cut until the porcelain was covered in black silk. I shaped the remaining hair into a sharp, angular bob that framed my face like a helmet. I looked in the mirror again. The soft wife was gone. In her place was a stranger with cold eyes and a jawline that could cut glass. I wiped the stray hairs from my neck. I did not look like a victim anymore. I looked like a CEO on the verge of a hostile takeover. I walked out into the bedroom and laid my outfit on the bed. It was not the modest pastel suit I had worn to the first hearing to garner sympathy. This was armor. A black Givenchy suit with sharp shoulders and a tailored waist, stiletto heels that were more weapon than footwear. Tomorrow I was not going to court to beg for mercy. I was going to court to preside over a funeral. I poured myself a glass of the expensive bourbon I had ordered the first night. I walked to the window and looked out at the sprawling lights of Atlanta. Somewhere out there in my house, my husband and my sister were sleeping soundly. They were dreaming of my money. They were dreaming of the life they were going to build on my grave. They had no idea that the sun was about to rise on their last day of freedom. I took a sip of the amber liquid. It burned on the way down, a pleasant fire that matched the one in my chest. I felt a strange sense of peace. The anxiety was gone. The fear was gone. There was only the plan. I went over the checklist in my head one last time. The DNA, the bank records, the IRS agent on standby, the foreclosure notice. Everything was ready. The stage was set. I finished the drink and set the glass down on the nightstand next to the stack of evidence folders. I climbed into the bed, but I did not close my eyes immediately. I stared at the ceiling, visualizing the moment the bailiff would click the handcuffs onto Liam's wrists. I visualized the look on my mother's face when she realized she was homeless. It was not a happy thought. It was a necessary one. I turned off the lamp and let the darkness take me. Tomorrow was Judgment Day. And I was the judge. I stepped out of the black SUV and the humidity of the Atlanta morning clung to my skin like a second layer of clothing. But I did not feel the heat. In my structured Givenchy suit and stilettos, I felt like a blade forged in ice. I walked toward the courthouse steps, my new sharp bob cutting the air as I moved. This was not the walk of a woman coming to surrender. This was the march of an executioner. Inside the lobby, the air conditioning hummed a low note of anticipation. And there they were, my family, my parents. Desmond and Patricia were dressed in their Sunday best, but these were not clothes from the department store rack. My mother wore a silk hat that cost more than my first car, and my father sported a gold watch that glinted under the fluorescent lights. They looked like lottery winners. And in a way they were. They had won the lottery of my stolen identity. Liam stood near the metal detectors laughing at something his lawyer said. He looked rested. He looked victorious. He thought the signed agreement in his briefcase was his ticket to paradise. He did not know it was just a confession signed in ink, but the centerpiece of the circus was Tanisha. She was standing near the entrance holding her phone up high, the ring light attachment blindingly bright. She was live streaming. I could hear her voice echoing off the marble walls, shrill and performative. "Hey guys, welcome back to the journey," she said into the camera, pouting her lips. "Today is the day. We are finally going to get justice for my son. My sister is here, and we are praying she does the right thing." Hit those likes if you support single moms fighting against toxic family members. She shifted the baby on her hip to get a better angle. The poor child looked exhausted, a prop in her reality show. She saw me approaching and zoomed the camera in on my face. Look guys, here she comes. She looks so angry. Pray for her heart, everyone. I walked past her without breaking stride. I did not hide my face. I looked directly into the lens and smiled. It was a smile that did not reach my eyes. It was the smile of a predator who sees the prey walk into the trap. Tanisha faltered for a second, her influencer mask slipping just a fraction. She expected the broken woman she saw yesterday. She did not recognize this version of me. Liam caught my eye as I passed. He winked. A disgusting conspiratorial wink that said, "I own you." I held his gaze. Enjoy it, Liam, I thought. Enjoy this last moment of arrogance, because in less than an hour you are going to wish you had never learned how to spell my name. We filed into the courtroom. They took their seats on the plaintiff's side, their laughter dying down to respectful whispers as the bailiff announced the arrival of the judge. They sat tall, confident in their fraud. They had no idea that the man sitting in the back row wearing a cheap suit and sunglasses was not a spectator. He was a special agent with the IRS, and he was holding a pair of handcuffs with Liam's name on them. All rise. The bailiff's voice cut through the murmur of the courtroom. Judge Miller swept onto the bench, her black robes billowing like storm clouds. She looked tired. She looked like a woman who wanted to clear her docket and go home. She fixed her gaze on me. "Ms. Brooks," she said, "you requested a 72-hour continuance to arrange your finances. The court has granted you that time. I assume you have returned today ready to fulfill your obligations to this child." Mr. Sterling Liam's lawyer stood up before I could answer. He smoothed his silk tie, his face beaming with the confidence of a man who thought he had already cashed the check. "Your Honor," he boomed, his voice filling the room. "My client and Ms. Brooks have reached a tentative verbal agreement. In light of Ms. Brooks' immense wealth and her desire to avoid further public scandal, she has agreed to the following terms." He picked up a document and began to read. It was the agreement Liam had forced me to sign in the coffee shop, but hearing it read aloud in open court made it sound even more grotesque. First, Ms. Brooks will pay $10,000 per month in child support to ensure the infant maintains the standard of living commensurate with the father's marital status. $10,000. A collective gasp went through the gallery. It was an obscene amount for a newborn. It was more than most families made in 3 months. Sterling continued, ignoring the noise. Second, Ms. Brooks grants Mr. Vance and the mother, Ms. Tanisha Brooks, exclusive use of the Buckhead estate until the child reaches the age of 18. This is to ensure the child has a stable home environment. Ms. Brooks has agreed to vacate the premises and continue paying all mortgage and utility costs. My mother, Patricia, nodded vigorously from the second row, murmuring, "Amen." She looked at me with a mixture of triumph and warning, daring me to object. She was ready to move into my guest room. She had probably already packed her bags. And finally, Sterling finished, looking directly at me with a smirk. "Miss Brooks acknowledges that her prioritizing of her career contributed to the breakdown of the marriage and agrees to issue a public statement of support for Mr. Vance and his new family unit." The judge looked at me over her spectacles. "Ms. Brooks, these are significant concessions. However, given the disparity in income and the needs of the child, the court is inclined to accept them if you are in agreement. Do you stipulate to these terms?" The pressure in the room was physical. It pressed against my chest. Liam was leaning forward, his eyes wide with greed. Tanisha was holding her breath. They were all waiting for me to say yes. They were waiting for the golden goose to lay the egg. I stood up slowly. I smoothed the lapels of my black Givenchy suit. I did not look at the judge immediately. I looked at Liam. I wanted him to remember this moment. I wanted him to remember the feeling of absolute certainty he had right now, because he was never going to feel it again. "Your Honor," I said, my voice clear and carrying to the back of the room, I appreciate Mr. Sterling's creative interpretation of our conversation, and I do agree that this child deserves financial stability. $10,000 is a lot of money. It is a life-changing amount of money. I paused, letting the hope bloom on their faces one last time. However, I continued. Before I sign away my home and my income, I believe the court needs to have a complete picture of the financial reality of this family. Mr. Sterling mentioned my wealth, but he forgot to mention my husband's debts. And if I am going to pay, I think we should know exactly what I am paying for. I walked to the witness stand with the measured grace of a woman walking down the aisle at her own wedding, only this time I was not there to say, I do. I was there to say, I am done. The silence in the courtroom was heavy, thick with the humidity of anticipation. I could feel Liam's eyes on me, burning with a mix of lust for my money and contempt for my spirit. He thought this was his moment. He thought he was watching me kneel. I placed my hands on the wooden railing. It was cool to the touch. I looked up at Judge Miller. Her face was stern, but there was curiosity in her eyes. She had seen thousands of divorces, thousands of broken families. But she had never seen a petitioner look quite as calm as I did while agreeing to give away her fortune. Your Honor, I said, my voice projecting clearly without a microphone. I stand before you today, ready to accept responsibility. If this child is indeed the future of the Vance legacy, then that legacy must be funded. $10,000 is a fair price for a future. My mother, Patricia, let out a loud, audible sigh of relief from the gallery. Praise Jesus, she whispered loud enough for the bailiff to hear. Tanisha smirked, adjusting the baby on her lap as if she had just won a lottery jackpot. Liam leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms over his chest, his face relaxing into a mask of smug satisfaction. They heard what they wanted to hear. They missed the razor blade hidden in the apple. However, I continued, my voice dropping an octave, hardening into steel. Before I sign any checks, before I transfer any deeds, and before I accept the burden of supporting a household that has actively worked to destroy me, I believe the court is entitled to a full and complete accounting of the marital assets. Mr. Sterling stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. Objection, Your Honor. We have already submitted Mr. Vance's financial affidavit. He is insolvent. His wife controls all the liquidity. This is just a delay tactic intended to punish a new mother. It is not a delay, I countered, turning to face him. It is due diligence. You claim my husband is destitute. You claim he is a victim of financial abuse. But financial abuse implies that there was money to be abused in the first place. If I am going to pay for his lifestyle, I believe I have the right to know exactly what that lifestyle costs. And more importantly, I have the right to know why a man who claims to be a successful architect has a negative net worth despite living like a king. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a sleek silver laptop. I held it up like a shield. I have prepared a short forensic presentation, Your Honor. It uses the data Mr. Vance provided in his own affidavit, along with public records and bank statements that seem to have been omitted from his filing. I ask the court his permission to display this evidence. The judge looked at Liam. He was not smiling anymore. He was shifting in his seat, his eyes darting to his lawyer. He knew he had skeletons. He just did not know I had the keys to the closet. Proceed, Ms. Brooks, the judge said, leaning forward. I connected the laptop to the courtroom display system. The large screen behind the judge flickered to life. The first slide was a picture of Liam smiling next to his Range Rover. It looked like a success story. I pressed the spacebar. The next slide was a spreadsheet, and it was bleeding red. Let us begin with the debts, I said. And for the first time since I walked in the room, Liam looked terrified. The courtroom lights dimmed slightly, making the projection screen blaze like a beacon of truth. The first slide was a simple pie chart, but it was sliced with devastating precision. One slice represented Liam's declared income zero. The rest of the chart was a kaleidoscope of debt, credit cards, personal loans, and a massive black slice labeled unsecured liabilities. Your Honor, I said, pointing to the screen. Mr. Sterling described my husband as a man of modest means. That is a generous understatement. My husband is not just broke, he is a financial black hole. I clicked to the next slide. It showed a list of credit card statements. Each one was maxed out: cash advances at casinos, luxury purchases at boutiques he could not afford. The total balance was over $100,000. Mr. Vance has not earned a legitimate income in 2 years. I continued, my voice echoing in the silent room. He claims to be an architect, but he has no clients, no projects, and no revenue. He has been funding his lifestyle and his affair with high-interest credit cards taken out in secret. Liam's face turned a sickly shade of gray. He started to stand up, but his lawyer pulled him back down, whispering furiously. Tanisha looked confused. She was doing the math in her head and coming up short. She thought she had caught a whale. She was realizing she had hooked a minnow. But credit card debt is manageable, I said, clicking again. This is where it gets interesting. The screen changed to show a scanned copy of a promissory note. It was handwritten and signed by Liam. The lender was Shadow Creek Holdings. The interest rate was 40%. The collateral was his kneecaps. My husband owes $250,000 to an organization that does not report to credit bureaus, I explained. They report to people with baseball bats. He has missed his last 3 payments. That is why he needs my money, Your Honor. Not for the baby, not for housing. He needs it to pay off the loan sharks before they break his legs. A gasp went through the gallery. My mother, Patricia, clutched her pearls, looking at Liam as if he had just sprouted horns. She thought he was a successful businessman. She thought he was the golden ticket. Now she was looking at a deadbeat gambler who had put a target on their backs. "This is slander!" Sterling shouted, jumping to his feet. "My client denies these allegations. These documents are forged." "They are not forged," I said calmly, "because I bought them." I clicked the remote. The screen showed the transfer confirmation from my bank to Shadow Creek Holdings. $300,000 paid in full. I paid off his debt, I said, looking directly at Liam. I own the note now. I am the creditor. And Mr. Vance, you are in default, which means I have the right to collect immediately. Liam slumped in his chair. He looked small. He looked defeated. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the terrified realization that his wife was not just leaving him, she was foreclosing on his life. The judge looked from the screen to Liam, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Vance, is this true?" she asked. "Do you owe your wife $250,000?" Liam opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He was drowning in the deep end of his own lies, and I was the only one with a life raft. But I was not throwing it. I was adding water. "But the debt is not the only asset I acquired," I said, my voice slicing through the stunned silence of the courtroom. "Mr. Sterling mentioned that I have been neglecting my family. He claimed I abandoned my parents in their time of need. He failed to mention that my parents have been living in a house they stopped paying for 6 months ago." I clicked the remote. The screen changed again. This time it showed the deed to 42 Oak Street, the house I grew up in, the house where my mother had slammed the door in my face just 2 days ago. Next to the deed was a foreclosure notice. "Mr. Desmond and Mrs. Patricia Brooks have been in default on their mortgage for half a year," I explained. "They prioritized luxury cars and country club memberships over their home. The bank was preparing to auction off the property next Tuesday. They would have been homeless." My mother stood up in the gallery, her face a mask of indignation. "That is a lie," she shouted, pointing a shaking finger at me. "We paid that mortgage off years ago. You are trying to embarrass us, Nia. You are a wicked child." "Sit down, Mrs. Brooks," the judge ordered, banging her gavel, "or I will have you removed." Patricia sat down, but her eyes were venomous. She truly believed her own lies. She had convinced herself that the foreclosure notices were mistakes, that the bank was wrong. She lived in a reality where consequences were for other people. I did not want my parents to lose their home to a stranger. I continued, my voice softening just enough to sound reasonable. "So I stepped in. I bought the mortgage from the bank." I clicked again. The screen showed the assignment of debt document. My signature was at the bottom next to the bank president is. I am now the sole lien holder on the property, I said, looking directly at my father. I own the note, and since the loan is in default, I am exercising my right to foreclose. My father, Desmond, grabbed the back of the pew in front of him, his knuckles white. He looked like he was having a heart attack. He realized what this meant. He was not just losing his house, he was losing it to the daughter he had betrayed. The power dynamic had shifted so violently, it had given him whiplash. I have already filed the eviction notice, I said. You have until 5 p.m. today to vacate the premises. The sheriff has been notified. Anything left inside after that time will be considered abandoned property. No, my mother screamed. You cannot do this. That is our home. We raised you there. You raised me to be a bankroll, I said, my voice hard again. You raised me to be a safety net. Well, the net just broke. You chose Liam over me. You chose fraud over family. Now you can choose which bridge you want to sleep under. The courtroom erupted. Reporters were typing furiously. Tanisha looked like she was going to be sick. She realized that her safety net, her parents' house, was gone. She was homeless twice over. Liam looked at my parents with disgust, realizing they were just as broke as he was. The alliance of parasites was crumbling. And I was just getting started. But buying debt is just a civil matter, I said, my voice casual, almost conversational. What comes next is a federal one. I looked toward the back of the courtroom. Agent Miller, would you please join us? A man in a dark suit stood up. He walked down the aisle with a heavy, purposeful stride. He flashed a badge. Special Agent Thomas Miller, IRS Criminal Investigation Division. The air in the room grew thin. Liam looked like he was trying to shrink into his chair. My father, Desmond, went pale, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Your Honor, I continued. While investigating my husband's finances, I uncovered something disturbing. 3 separate loans from the Paycheck Protection Program totaling $1.2 million. These loans were taken out by a company called Brooks Vance Consulting. A company that does not exist. A company that lists me as the majority shareholder without my knowledge or consent. I clicked the remote. The screen displayed the forged application documents side by side with a handwriting analysis report. Mr. Vance and Mr. Brooks used my social security number to defraud the United States government, I said. They falsified payroll records. They invented employees, and they spent the money on luxury cars, vacations, and gambling debts. That is wire fraud, bank fraud, and identity theft. Agent Miller stepped forward, holding a warrant. Liam Vance, Desmond Brooks, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud and money laundering. 2 uniformed officers moved in. They pulled Liam out of his chair. He did not fight. He looked dazed. He looked at Tanisha, but she was staring at the floor, refusing to meet his eyes. The handcuffs clicked shut around his wrists with a sound that echoed like a gunshot. My father was next. He tried to pull away. I am an old man, he shouted. This is a mistake. My daughter is lying. She is doing this out of spite. The officers ignored him. They spun him around and cuffed him. My mother, Patricia, started screaming. Not my husband, not my Desmond. Nia, tell them to stop. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. It was not a misunderstanding, Mom, I said, looking at her. It was a crime. And you spent the money too. You drove the Cadillac. You wore the clothes. You are an accessory. Be glad they are not arresting you today. Yet. The courtroom was in chaos. Reporters were shouting questions. The judge was banging her gavel, demanding order. But I just stood there watching the men who had tormented me being led away in chains. They had tried to steal my life. Instead, they had stolen their own freedom. Liam looked back at me as he was dragged toward the side door. His eyes were wide with terror. Nia, please, he begged. Call your lawyer. Make a deal. I will give you anything. You have nothing to give Liam, I said. You are bankrupt. You are homeless. And now you are a federal inmate. Enjoy the view. The door closed behind them, leaving a silence so profound it felt like the world had stopped spinning. 2 down, 1 to go. I turned my gaze to Tanisha. She was clutching the baby, looking like a trapped animal. She knew she was next, and she was right. The heavy wooden doors swung shut behind the officers, dragging my husband and father away, but the noise in the courtroom did not stop. It exploded. The gallery was on its feet. Reporters were shouting over each other, trying to get a quote. The judge was hammering her gavel so hard I thought the handle might snap, but nobody was listening to order anymore. Chaos was the new law of the land. In the center of the storm stood Tanisha. She had risen from her seat, clutching the baby like a shield against the consequences raining down on her family. Her face was not pale with shock. It was flushed with a violent, ugly rage. She looked at the empty chairs where her accomplices had just been sitting, then she turned her eyes on me. If looks could kill, I would have been dead on the floor. "You did this," she screamed, her voice shrill enough to cut through the din. "You are a monster, Nia. You planned this. You set them up." She stepped into the aisle, moving toward the plaintiff table where I stood. The baby started crying again, a high, thin wail that joined the chorus of madness. "Look at what you have done," Tanisha yelled, pointing a shaking finger at me. "You sent your own father to jail. You sent the father of my child to prison. And for what? Because you are jealous. That is all this is. You cannot stand that Liam loves me. You cannot stand that I gave him a son. You would rather destroy the whole family than see us happy." The cameras flashed blindingly, capturing her meltdown. She played to them instinctively. She turned her tear-streaked face toward the press gallery, shifting the baby to her other hip to make sure they got the best angle of her distress. "She hates us," she sobbed loudly, her narrative shifting seamlessly from aggression to victimhood. "My sister has always hated me. She has money and power, and she uses it to crush anyone who gets in her way. She framed them. I know she did. Liam is a good man. My daddy is a good man. They would never steal." She planted that evidence. I watched her perform. It was fascinating in a morbid, clinical way. Even with the handcuffs barely cold on her lover's wrists, she was still trying to spin the story. She truly believed that if she screamed loud enough, reality would bend to her will. She honestly thought that her tears were a valid legal defense against federal fraud charges. "You want to kill us!" she shrieked, her voice cracking. "You want this baby to starve. You want me on the street. You are not a sister. You are a devil." I did not interrupt her. I let her scream. I let her spew her venom and her lies because every word she said was digging her hole deeper. She was tying herself to the sinking ship. She was publicly defending felons claiming their innocence moments after the IRS had presented irrefutable proof. The bailiff moved to intercept her, but I held up a hand. Let her speak, I thought. Let everyone see exactly who she is. She was not a victim. She was the architect of her own disaster, furious that the building had collapsed on top of her. "You think you won?" Tanisha hissed, leaning over the railing, her face inches from mine. "You think this makes you powerful. It just makes you alone. Nobody loves you, Nia. Nobody. Liam stayed with you for the money. Mom and Dad tolerated you for the money. And now you have nothing." I looked at her, calm and unmoving. I did not have nothing. I had one more piece of paper in my briefcase, and it was going to turn her scream into a whimper. I waited until Tanisha ran out of breath. Her chest was heaving, her mascara running in black streaks down her cheeks. The courtroom was dead silent, the only sound the soft whimpering of the baby. Everyone was watching me, waiting for the counterattack. They expected me to defend myself. They expected me to argue. Instead, I reached into my briefcase and pulled out the single sheet of paper I had received from the lab. "You talk a lot about family, Tanisha," I said, my voice soft but carrying to the back of the room. "You talk about Liam, his son. You talk about his legacy. You stood here in front of a judge and swore that Liam chose you because you could give him a child." Tanisha narrowed her eyes, wiping her nose on her sleeve. "He is his son," she spat. "He has his eyes. Everyone says so." I walked over to the projection system and placed the document on the glass. The image filled the screen behind the judge, looming large and undeniable. It was the DNA test report. The probability index was highlighted in bright yellow. 0%. A murmur went through the crowd like a wave. Tanisha turned around slowly. She looked at the screen. She blinked once, twice, trying to comprehend what she was seeing. Then her face drained of color. It was not the pale of shock. It was the gray of a corpse. Liam thought he was fighting for his blood, I said, addressing the gallery. He stole my money, he ruined my credit, and he went to prison to support a child he believed was his own. But he was wrong. I turned back to Tanisha. Liam is not the father, is he? Tanisha opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She looked at the baby in her arms as if seeing him for the first time. The prop had suddenly become evidence. You lied to him, I continued, relentless. You lied to our parents. You lied to the court. You found a man who was desperate for a legacy, and you sold him a fantasy. Who is the real father, Tanisha? Is it Marcus Sterling? The name hit her like a physical blow. She staggered back, clutching the railing for support. How did you know? She whispered. I know everything, I said. I know about the affair with the married venture capitalist. I know he paid you to go away. I know he blocked your number when you told him you were pregnant. And I know you decided Liam was the perfect backup plan, the perfect patsy to pay for your mistake. The crowd erupted. The betrayal was absolute. Liam was not just a criminal. He was a fool. He had destroyed his life for a woman who was using him as an ATM for another man's child. He was sitting in a holding cell right now thinking he had sacrificed everything for his son. He had sacrificed everything for a lie. That is not true, Tanisha screamed, but her voice lacked conviction. It was the desperate cry of a cornered animal. Liam is the father. That test is fake. You forged it. I did not forge it, I said coldly. I took the sample myself. From the diaper you left in my guest room. The science does not lie, Tanisha. Only you do. I looked at the judge. Your Honor. This child has no biological claim to my husband. Therefore, I have no legal obligation to support him. The motion for child support is based on a fraudulent paternity claim. Judge Miller looked at Tanisha with a mixture of pity and disgust. Ms. Brooks, she said, is there any truth to this report? Tanisha looked around the room. She saw the cameras. She saw the judgment. She saw her future evaporating. She looked at me, and for the first time, I saw fear. Real primal fear. The game was over, and she had lost everything. The silence in the courtroom did not last long. It was shattered by a sound that was not quite human. It was a guttural roar of pure primal rage, and it came from the man in handcuffs standing near the side exit. Liam Vance had just realized that he had sold his soul for a counterfeit receipt. He spun around with a violence that caught the marshals off guard. His face was a mask of contorted fury, his veins bulging against his neck like cords of rope. He looked at Tanisha not with the adoration he had shown in the apartment, but with the hatred of a man who knows he has been played for a fool. You knew, he screamed, spitting the words across the room. You knew the whole time. He lunged. Even with his hands cuffed behind his back, he moved with terrifying speed. He threw his shoulder into the bailiff, knocking the man aside, and charged toward the plaintiff table, where Tanisha stood frozen. Tanisha screamed a high, piercing sound of terror and scrambled backward, tripping over her own diaper bag. She held the baby out not as an offering but as a shield, her maternal instinct overridden by self-preservation. You ruined me, Liam bellowed. I went to jail for you. I stole for you, and it is not even my kid. He slammed his body against the wooden railing, trying to reach her, trying to hurt her. The illusion of their true love, the narrative of the soulmates who found each other against all odds, evaporated in that instant. There was no love here. There was only the ugly truth of two predators turning on each other when the prey fought back. 3 officers were on him in seconds. They tackled him to the ground, his expensive suit tearing at the seams, his face pressed against the dirty courtroom floor. But he did not stop screaming. He thrashed and kicked, cursing Tanisha, cursing her mother, cursing the day he met her. She is a liar, he shouted, his voice cracking. She told me it was mine. She swore on her life. I want a divorce. I want to testify against her. I will tell you everything. I will tell you about the bank accounts. I will tell you where she hid the money. I watched from the witness stand, my face impassive. This was the man who had called me cold. This was the man who had called me defective. Now he was bargaining for his life, offering up his lover to save his own skin. It was pathetic. Tanisha was sobbing hysterically, now curled into a ball on the floor, the baby wailing beside her. Her lawyer was backing away, distancing himself from the blast radius. My parents were huddled in the gallery, clutching each other, watching their golden boy turn into a monster. They had bet everything on this couple, on this perfect union that was supposed to replace me. Now they were watching it tear itself apart with teeth and claws. The marshals finally subdued Liam, dragging him back to his feet. He was panting, his hair wild, blood trickling from a cut on his lip. He looked at me then. His eyes were wild, pleading. "Nia, please," he gasped. "You have to help me. She tricked me. I am a victim too." I looked at him and felt absolutely nothing, no pity, no anger. Just the hollow realization that I had wasted 10 years on a man who had no center, no spine, and no honor. "You are not a victim, Liam," I said, my voice cutting through his panic. "You are a volunteer. You volunteered to betray me. You volunteered to steal. And now you can volunteer to tell your cellmate all about the son you never had." "Take him away," the judge ordered, her voice shaking with suppressed anger. "Get him out of my courtroom." They dragged him out, kicking and screaming, leaving Tanisha alone in the wreckage of her own lies. The love story was over. The horror story had just begun. The doors slammed shut behind Liam, but the echo of his rage still vibrated in the air. The courtroom was in a state of suspended animation. The reporters were typing so fast their fingers were a blur. The bailiffs were trying to restore order, but even they looked shaken. Tanisha was still on the floor, sobbing into the carpet, but no one moved to comfort her. She was radioactive. Judge Miller banged her gavel 3 times. The sound was sharp and authoritative, cutting through the chaos. "Order," she commanded. "Order in this court immediately." The room quieted. Tanisha dragged herself back to her chair, still clutching the baby. She looked small now, small and pathetic. The grandiose victim narrative she had spun was gone, replaced by the ugly reality of her fraud. "Ms. Brooks," the judge said, turning to me. Her voice was no longer skeptical. It was respectful, almost apologetic. "The evidence presented today is compelling and frankly disturbing. The court finds that the basis for the emergency support order, namely the paternity of the child and the financial destitution of the father, was fraudulent." She paused, looking down at her notes. "Furthermore, based on the evidence of identity theft, wire fraud, and conspiracy presented by the federal agents, this court is referring the matter of custody to Child Protective Services, pending a full investigation into the fitness of the mother." Tanisha let out a strangled cry. "No," she wailed. "You cannot take my baby. He is all I have." "You should have thought of that before you used him as a pawn in a felony scheme," the judge said coldly. I stood there, feeling the weight of the moment. I had won, but it did not feel like a celebration. It felt like survival. I had walked through fire and come out the other side, not burned, but forged. "The court hereby dismisses the petition for spousal and child support with prejudice," the judge continued. "The temporary restraining order against Ms. Nia Brooks regarding the marital property is vacated immediately. Ms. Brooks is granted sole possession of the residence at 42 Oak Street and the Buckhead estate, pending the final division of assets in the divorce proceedings, which I suspect will be heavily weighted in her favor, given the criminal conduct of the respondent." She looked at me. "You are free to go, Ms. Brooks. And might I add, the court appreciates your thoroughness. Justice was served today." "Thank you, Your Honor," I said. I gathered my files, the DNA report, the bank records, the deed. I put them back in my briefcase. I did not look at Tanisha. I did not need to. She was already irrelevant. She was a footnote in her own life story, a cautionary tale about greed and hubris. I turned to leave. The reporters shouted questions, but I ignored them. I walked down the aisle, my heels clicking a steady rhythm on the floor. I passed my parents in the second row. They were sitting there stunned and silent. My father Desmond looked like he had aged 10 years in 10 minutes. My mother Patricia was staring at the empty doorway where Liam had been dragged out, her lips moving in a silent prayer that was not going to be answered. I did not stop. I did not acknowledge them. They had made their choice, and now they were living with it. I pushed through the double doors and into the hallway. The air was cooler out here, cleaner. I took a deep breath. It tasted like freedom. It tasted like victory. The heat of the parking lot rose up in shimmering waves, distorting the air as I walked toward my car. The adrenaline that had sustained me in the courtroom was fading, leaving behind a heavy exhaustion. I just wanted to get into the cool leather seat of my rental and drive until the city was a speck in my rearview mirror. But I heard the frantic clicking of heels behind me. It was a chaotic, uneven rhythm, not the confident stride of a woman in control. Nia, wait. Please, just wait. I did not turn around. I knew that voice. It was the voice that had criticized my hair, told me I was too ambitious, and whispered to my sister that I was defective. It was my mother, Patricia. She grabbed my arm, her fingers digging into the fabric of my suit. I stopped and looked down at her hand. The manicured nails looked garish against the black sleeve. I pulled my arm away with a sharp jerk. "Do not touch me," I said, my voice low and dangerous. Patricia looked terrible. The confident matriarch who had sat in the front row of the church was gone. In her place was a terrified old woman with mascara smudged under her eyes and sweat beading on her upper lip. Her hat was askew. She was trembling. "Nia, you cannot do this," she gasped, trying to catch her breath. "You cannot take the house. It is all we have. Your father has a heart condition. If the sheriff throws us out on the street, it will kill him. Do you want that on your conscience? Do you want to be the daughter who killed her father?" I stared at her, unable to believe the audacity. Even now, standing in the wreckage she created, she was trying to manipulate me. She was using my father's health as a weapon, just like she had used my infertility. "You should have thought about his heart when you were stealing my identity," I said. "You should have thought about it when you were gambling away the mortgage payments. You killed him, Mom. You and your greed. Do not put that corpse at my feet." I turned to the car door, but she moved in front of me, blocking my path. Her eyes were wild. "We made a mistake," she cried. "We were desperate. Liam promised us it would work. He said it was just a loan on paper. We were going to pay it back. We did it for the family, Nia. We did it to secure the legacy." "The legacy?" I laughed, a harsh sound. "You sold Grandma's earrings. You stole the only thing she left me, and you bought fake diamonds to cover it up. Was that for the family too? Or was that just for you?" She flinched as if I had slapped her. She knew about the earrings. She realized in that moment that I knew everything. There were no more secrets to hide behind, no more lies to spin. She looked around the parking lot. People were watching, lawyers walking to their cars, reporters packing up their gear. She saw the audience, but for the first time in her life, she did not care about appearances. She cared about survival. Patricia Brooks, the woman who prided herself on her dignity, sank to her knees right there on the dirty asphalt. Her expensive stockings tore on the concrete. She grabbed my hand, clinging to it like a lifeline. "Please, Nia," she sobbed, loud and unashamed. "I am begging you. I will do anything. I will tell everyone Tanisha is a liar. I will testify against Liam. Just let us keep the house. Do not make us homeless. I am your mother. I gave you life. Show me some mercy." I looked down at the woman on the ground. I remembered looking up at her when I was a child, desperate for her approval, desperate for her to look at me the way she looked at Tanisha. I had spent my whole life trying to buy the love she was now trying to beg for. I pulled my hand from her grip. She slumped forward, her hands hitting the pavement. "You gave me life," I said, unlocking my car door. "But you also tried to take it away. You tried to destroy me to save yourself. That is not a mother. That is a parasite." I got into the car and slammed the door, shutting out her wails. I watched her in the rearview mirror as I drove away. She was still kneeling on the ground, a small broken figure in the vast empty lot. I did not feel guilty. I did not feel sad. I just felt finished. I looked down at the woman kneeling on the asphalt. The heat radiating off the blacktop was suffocating, but inside my chest I felt nothing but a glacial calm. Patricia was sobbing, clutching at the hem of my trousers like a drowning sailor grabbing at driftwood. Her mascara was running in dark rivers down her cheeks, ruining the expensive foundation I had paid for. She looked small. She looked pathetic. But most of all, she looked like a stranger. "Please, Nia," she choked out, her voice raspy with desperation. "We are family. Blood is thicker than water. You cannot leave us like this." I gently pried her fingers off my leg one by one. I did not shove her. I did not kick her. I simply removed her grip with the clinical detachment of a doctor removing a tumor. "Blood is not a contract, Patricia." I said, my voice low and steady. "It is biology. Family is behavior. Family is loyalty. And you broke that contract a long time ago." I opened the car door. The interior of the rental smelled like stale air freshener and industrial cleaner, but to me, it smelled like a sanctuary. I slid into the driver's seat and placed my hands on the wheel. Patricia scrambled up from her knees, lunging for the door handle before I could pull it shut. "Nia, listen to me," she cried. "We can fix this. I will make Tanisha apologize. We will sell the furniture. We will work something out. Just do not take the house. Where will we go?" I looked her in the eye through the open window. It was the last time I would ever really look at her. I saw the fear. I saw the greed. But I looked for love and found absolutely nothing. "You can go to Tanisha," I said. "She is the golden child, right? She is the one you bet everything on. Go live in the world you built with her." "But she has nothing," Patricia wailed. "She is ruined." "Exactly," I said. "And now so are you." I pulled the door shut. The heavy thud of the latch engaging was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of a vault closing. It was the sound of the end. Patricia pounded on the glass, her mouth moving in silent screams. She was shouting my name. She was shouting prayers. She was shouting curses. It did not matter. The soundproof glass turned her into a silent movie, a frantic performance that no longer had an audience. I pressed the ignition button. The engine purred to life. I shifted the car into reverse and backed out of the parking space. I did not rush. I did not peel out of the lot like a teenager. I drove with the measured precision of a woman who had nowhere to be but was exactly where she needed to be. I glanced at the rearview mirror one last time. Patricia was standing in the middle of the lane watching me go. She looked like a ghost haunting a graveyard she had dug herself. For a fleeting second, a memory surfaced. I remembered her holding my hand on the first day of kindergarten, telling me to be brave. I remembered how much I wanted to make her proud. I pushed the memory down deep into the darkness, where I kept the rest of my pain. I turned onto the main road, and the image of my mother vanished from the mirror, replaced by the open highway. The tears I expected did not come. There was no grief. There was only a profound lightness. The weight of their expectations, the burden of their debts, the anchor of their judgment. It was all gone. I reached over to the passenger seat and picked up my sunglasses. I put them on, shielding my eyes from the harsh Atlanta sun. I turned on the radio. Music filled the car, drowning out the phantom echoes of my mother's voice. I was alone. I was disowned. I was an orphan by choice. And for the first time in my entire life, I was free. The fluorescent lights of the Federal Detention Center buzzed with a sound that felt like it was drilling into my brain. It had been 30 days since the judge brought the gavel down, but it felt like 30 years. The luxury of the Buckhead estate was a distant memory, replaced by 6 by 8 feet of concrete and steel. I looked across the small cell at the bottom bunk where Desmond was curled up facing the wall. My father-in-law, the man who used to wear silk suits and drink aged scotch, looked like a skeleton wrapped in a gray jumpsuit. He was coughing a wet, hacking sound that echoed in the small space. Desmond turned over, his eyes milky with cataracts and fear. He looked at me with pure hatred. "This is your fault, Liam," he wheezed. "You promised us. You said it was a foolproof plan. You said Nia was stupid. Now look at us. 10 years. I will die in here." I did not have the energy to argue. I touched the fresh bruise on my cheekbone. It was a souvenir from the shower block yesterday. I had tried to explain to a gang member that I was an architect, that I deserved respect. He taught me very quickly that the only currency in here was violence, and I was bankrupt. "Shut up, Desmond," I muttered, staring at the graffiti scratched into the paint above my head. I lost everything, too. I lost my firm. I lost my reputation. And for what? For a kid that was not even mine. That was the thought that kept me awake at night. The DNA test. 0%. I had stolen from my wife. I had committed federal fraud. I had destroyed my marriage, all for a child that belonged to some venture capitalist who was probably laughing at me right now. Tanisha played me. She played all of us. And I fell for it because I was arrogant. The cell door rattled as a guard walked by, dragging his baton against the bars. "Chow time, ladies," he shouted. I stood up, my knees popping. I was 35, but I felt 80. I helped Desmond up. He was frail. He needed me, and I hated him for it. We walked out into the chaotic noise of the general population. It was a sea of gray uniforms and hard eyes. We were the fresh meat, the white-collar criminals who thought they were smarter than the system. We got our trays and sat at a corner table trying to be invisible. But there is no invisibility in prison. A large inmate with tattoos covering his neck sat down opposite us. He reached over and took Desmond his cornbread. Desmond looked at me, his eyes pleading for me to do something. To be the man. To be the protector. I looked down at my tray. I did not move. I did not speak. I let the man take the food. I saw the light go out in Desmond's eyes. He realized then that I was not a leader. I was just a coward who got caught. 10 years, I whispered to myself. 10 years of this. And somewhere out there, Nia was drinking wine in a house I paid for with my freedom. She was free. And I was in a cage of my own making. The regret was a physical pain sharper than any beating. I had the perfect life, and I threw it away for a lie. The alarm clock screamed at 4 in the morning, cutting through the thin walls of the studio apartment like a siren. I rolled over on the lumpy mattress that smelled faintly of mildew and previous tenants. My back screamed in protest, a sharp, jagged pain that shot down my spine. This was my new reality. There were no silk sheets anymore. There was no smell of brewing coffee prepared by a housekeeper. There was just the damp chill of a basement unit in the worst part of East Point, and the terrifying realization that I had to get up and do it all over again. I put on my uniform. It was a shapeless gray polyester tunic that scratched my skin. I pinned a plastic name tag to my chest. It read Patricia. No last name, no title, just a first name for people to ignore while I emptied their trash cans. I took the bus to the city center, sitting next to people I used to look down on. I used to lock my car doors when I drove through these neighborhoods. Now I lived here. I worked as a janitor in a high-rise office building in Midtown. The irony was a bitter pill I swallowed every single day. I used to come to buildings like this to have lunch with my husband, or to shop at the boutiques downstairs. Now I entered through the service loading dock. I spent my days scrubbing toilets that belonged to women who reminded me of Nia. Successful women. Powerful women. Women who looked right through me, as if I were part of the plumbing. My hands, once manicured and soft, were now red and cracked from the harsh industrial chemicals. My knees were bruised from kneeling on tile floors. Yesterday I was mopping the lobby when I saw a woman who looked like one of my old friends from the country club. I panicked. I ducked into a supply closet and hid behind a stack of paper towels, my heart hammering against my ribs. I stood there in the dark, smelling the bleach and the dust, trembling with shame. I was Patricia Brooks. I was a deaconess. I was a pillar of the community. And now I was hiding in a closet, terrified that someone might recognize the woman scrubbing the floor. At night, I came back to the apartment. It was a single room with a hot plate and a window that looked out onto a brick wall. I ate dinner alone, usually soup from a can or a sandwich made with day-old bread. The silence was the worst part. I used to complain about the noise of the family. I used to complain about Desmond turns snoring or the baby crying. Now I would give anything to hear a human voice. Desmond was in prison. I could not afford to visit him. Tanisha had vanished the moment the money ran out, leaving me to face the wreckage alone. And Nia. I tried to call her once from a payphone. I heard her voice on the voicemail, cool and professional. I hung up before the beep. I knew she would not answer. I knew I did not deserve an answer. I looked at the small cracked mirror over the sink. The woman staring back was old. Her eyes were hollow. Her spirit was broken. I had gambled my family for a fantasy of wealth, and I had lost. I was not just poor. I was erased. I was a ghost haunting the edges of a world I used to own, waiting for the end in a room that nobody would ever visit. The smell of stale frying oil was embedded in my pores. It was a thick, greasy scent that no amount of scrubbing could remove. I stood behind the counter of the Waffle House on the midnight shift, wiping down a sticky laminated menu. My feet throbbed inside my non-slip shoes. My back ached from carrying trays of heavy plates for 8 hours straight. This was my stage now, not Instagram, not TikTok, just a 24-hour diner off the interstate where the customers were either drunk or desperate. A notification popped up on my cracked phone screen. I did not look at it. I knew what it said. Even a month later, the hate train had not slowed down. To the world, I was not Tanisha the lifestyle influencer. I was Tanisha the gold digger, the DNA fraud. The woman who tried to steal her sister's life. I had lost every brand deal. I had lost every follower who mattered. The only people watching my stories now were trolls waiting to screenshot my misery so they could post it on forums and laugh. "Excuse me, miss." A man in a trucker hat waved his coffee cup at me. I walked over, forcing a smile that felt like it was cracking my face. I poured the coffee, avoiding eye contact. He looked at me closely, his eyes narrowing. "Hey, I know you," he said loud enough for the next booth to hear. "You are that girl from the court video. The one who lied about the baby." My hand shook, spilling hot coffee onto the table. I grabbed a napkin, frantically wiping it up while my face burned with shame. "No, sir," I whispered. "You must be mistaken. I just have one of those faces." He laughed, a cruel, loud sound. "Yeah, right. You are the one who tried to scam her own family. How is that working out for you? Looks like karma served you a slice of humble pie." He left a single dollar on the table. $1. That was the price of my dignity now. I pocketed it because I had to. I needed that dollar to buy diapers. I finished my shift at 6 in the morning and walked to the bus stop in the gray dawn light. My son was waiting at the cheap 24-hour daycare center down the street. It was a damp room that smelled of bleach and crying children. I picked him up and he felt heavy in my arms. He looked so much like Marcus, the man who blocked my number, the man who was sleeping in a mansion with his wife, while his son slept in a crib I bought at a thrift store. I sat on the bus rocking the sleeping baby, trying to ignore the stares of the other passengers. We were heading back to a studio apartment that cost half my monthly wages. The walls were thin and the neighbors were loud. I closed my eyes and pictured the guest room at Nia's house. The silk curtains, the quiet, the safety. I had it all. I was living in luxury. I was being taken care of. And I threw it away because I got greedy. I wanted to be the queen. I wanted to see Nia fail. Now Nia was the one living in the castle, and I was the one scrubbing grease off tables. I looked down at my son. He shifted in his sleep, unaware that his mother had ruined his life before it even started. I was alone, truly alone. And the hardest part was knowing that I had absolutely no one to blame but myself. I pulled my car up to the curb of 42 Oak Street for the final time. The house sat in silence under the afternoon sun. It looked deceptively normal. The lawn was overgrown and the windows were dark, but the structure itself still stood as a monument to the family that had lived there. To anyone passing by, it was just a suburban brick home. To me, it was a crime scene where my childhood had been stolen and sold for parts. I got out of the car and walked up the driveway. I did not have a key. I did not need one. The contractor was waiting for me by the front porch holding a clipboard and looking impatient. His name was Mr. Henderson, a developer who specialized in distressed properties. He looked at the house with the calculating eyes of a butcher sizing up a carcass. "Miss Brooks," he said, extending a hand. "I have the papers ready. We just need your final signature on the scope of work." I nodded and took the clipboard. I looked at the house one last time. I remembered the Christmas mornings in that living room where my mother would stage photos for her holiday cards, pretending we were the perfect family. I remembered the kitchen where my father would sit and lecture me about responsibility while he gambled away his retirement. I remembered the bedroom where I cried when I found out I could not conceive, and my mother told me it was God's way of testing me. Every brick held a lie. Every room held a memory of manipulation. If I sold the house to a family, the rot would still be there. The bad energy would seep into the walls. I could not let that happen. I could not let this house stand as a testament to the Brooks legacy. I looked at Mr. Henderson. "I do not want you to renovate it," I said, my voice flat. He looked confused. "But the bones are good, Ms. Brooks. We could flip this in 3 months. A fresh coat of paint, some new cabinets, and it would sell for a premium." "No," I said, cutting him off. "I do not want a flip. I want a demolition." He blinked. "You want me to tear it down?" "I want you to flatten it," I said. "I want you to bring in the bulldozers and crush every single wall. I want the foundation dug up. I want the trees removed. I want this lot to be nothing but red Georgia dirt by the end of the week." "But the value," he started to protest. "The value is in the land." I said, signing the paper with a sharp scratch of the pen. "I am selling you the dirt, Mr. Henderson. The house is garbage. Bury it." I handed the clipboard back to him. He looked at the signature, and then at the house, shrugging his shoulders. It was just a job to him. He did not understand that he was not just removing a building, he was performing an exorcism. I walked back to my car without looking at the front door. I did not need to go inside. There was nothing in there for me. My parents had abandoned the furniture and the photos when the sheriff kicked them out, but those things meant nothing. They were props, and the play was over. I sat in the driver's seat and started the engine. I watched Mr. Henderson pull out his phone, probably calling the demolition crew to schedule the wrecking ball. A sense of profound relief washed over me. Soon this address would just be an empty lot. The physical evidence of my childhood trauma would be erased from the earth. I put the car in drive and pulled away from the curb. I did not look in the rearview mirror. I drove toward the highway, toward the city, toward the future. The house was gone in my mind already, and I had never felt more at home in my own skin. The elevator doors slid open to reveal the penthouse ballroom of the St. Regis Hotel. The room was bathed in the golden glow of the setting sun reflecting off the floor-to-ceiling windows. It was a stark contrast to the last time I was here, when I checked in with a roll of cash hidden in my boot. Tonight, I walked in not as a fugitive, but as the guest of honor. The room was filled with the elite of the Atlanta financial world, partners from the biggest law firms, venture capitalists, and the clients who had stuck by me through the storm. They were holding crystal flutes of champagne, and the hum of their conversations stopped the moment I stepped onto the plush carpet. I was wearing a dress made of liquid gold silk that draped over my body like armor. I held my head high. David stood on the small stage at the front of the room holding a microphone. He looked at me and grinned, the same mischievous grin he wore when we plotted the fake termination letter. He tapped the glass with a spoon, and the room went silent. "Ladies and gentlemen," David said, his voice booming with pride. "For the past 7 years, you have known Nia Brooks as the best forensic accountant in the Southeast. You knew her as the woman who could find a needle in a haystack of tax returns. But there was one thing even she was hiding. Tonight it is my distinct privilege to finally tell the truth. Please raise your glasses to the majority shareholder and managing partner of Sterling and Associates. My boss, Nia Brooks." The gasp that went through the room was followed instantly by thunderous applause. I walked through the crowd shaking hands, accepting congratulations. The look in their eyes had changed. It was no longer just respect for a talented employee. It was deference to a peer. I was one of them. I had always been one of them, but now I did not have to pretend to be smaller to keep my fragile husband comfortable. I took the stage and looked out at the sea of faces. I saw Julian, my banker, raising his glass. I saw Mr. Thorne, my lawyer, nodding approvingly. These were my people. This was my chosen family, people who valued loyalty, competence, and honor. "Thank you," I said, my voice steady and amplified. For a long time I believed that silence was safety. I thought that if I minimized my success, I could protect the people I loved from their own insecurity. But I learned a hard lesson this month. You cannot set yourself on fire to keep others warm. Tonight we are not just celebrating a new title, we are celebrating the freedom to be exactly who we are. The applause washed over me like a cleansing rain. I stepped down and mingled with the crowd. My phone buzzed in my clutch. It was a notification from the firm's accounts. We had just closed the biggest quarter in our history. The publicity from the trial had not ruined me. It had turned me into a legend. I was the woman who caught the fraudsters in her own kitchen. Every CEO in the city wanted me to audit their books, because they knew that if I could take down my own father, I would have no mercy on their embezzling executives. I walked out onto the balcony and breathed in the night air. The city lights twinkled below me. It was the same skyline I had looked at from the hotel window when I thought my life was over. But tonight, it looked different. It did not look like a cage. It looked like a kingdom. I took a sip of champagne and tasted the sweetness of total, absolute independence. I was rich. I was powerful. But most importantly, I was whole. The silent partner had finally found her voice, and she was never going to be quiet again. The engines of the Air France jet hummed a low, steady lullaby that vibrated gently through the soles of my feet. I reclined the leather seat of the first-class cabin all the way back, stretching my legs into the ample space that money could buy. I looked out the oval window. Below me, the Atlantic Ocean was a vast sheet of wrinkled blue steel, stretching out to meet a horizon that seemed infinite. Atlanta was thousands of miles behind me. The courthouse, the jail, the run-down apartment where my mother now slept, and the empty lot where my childhood home once stood were all part of a different world, a world I no longer inhabited. The flight attendant, a woman with an impeccable French accent and a silk scarf tied around her neck, materialized at my elbow. She placed a crystal flute of vintage Dom Perignon on the linen tablecloth of my tray. "Is there anything else I can get for you, Ms. Brooks?" she asked softly. "No, thank you," I said, picking up the glass. "This is perfect." I took a sip, allowing the cold bubbles to dance on my tongue. I reached for my phone, which I had connected to the satellite Wi-Fi. I intended to check my itinerary for Paris. I had booked a suite at the Ritz overlooking the Place Vendôme. I planned to spend a month just walking, eating croissants, and forgetting that the name Vance ever existed. But as I unlocked the screen, a notification banner dropped down from the top. It was an email. The sender was listed as Core Links, the secure email system used by federal inmates. The subject line was simply, "Help." I hesitated for a fraction of a second. I could have swiped it away. I could have ignored it. But curiosity, that old familiar ghost, nudged me. I opened the message. It was from Desmond, my father. "Nia," the email read. The letters were typed in all caps, aggressive and desperate. "I hope you are happy. It is hell in here. The food is inedible. The bed is hard. My back is killing me. Liam got beaten up in the yard yesterday. He is crying all the time. I need money for the commissary. I need to buy protection. I am your father. You cannot let me die in here, please. Send 5,000. It is nothing to you. Be a Christian. Forgive us. Love, Dad. I stared at the screen. Even from a prison cell, he was still trying to hustle me. He was still trying to use guilt as a currency. He mentioned Liam gets beaten up not to ask for sympathy, but to explain why he needed cash. He invoked God and family in the same breath as a demand for a wire transfer. He had not learned a single thing. He was not sorry. He was just uncomfortable. I looked at the words one last time. I tried to find the anger that used to burn so hot in my chest. I tried to find the sadness that used to make me cry myself to sleep. But there was nothing. No heat, no tears, just a quiet indifference like looking at a stranger is spam email. My thumb hovered over the menu options. I did not reply. I did not forward it to my lawyer. I simply tapped the 3 dots in the corner and selected the option in red letters. Block sender. A confirmation box popped up. Are you sure you want to block this contact? You will no longer receive messages from this inmate. I pressed yes. The screen refreshed and the email vanished into the digital void. It was done. The last line of communication was severed. I was unreachable. I put the phone face down on the table and picked up my champagne. I looked out the window again. The sun was setting, painting the clouds in hues of violet and gold. I felt a smile tug at the corners of my mouth. It started small, but then it spread until I was beaming at the empty sky. It was not a smile of revenge. It was a smile of peace. I closed my eyes and listened to the hum of the engines, carrying me toward a future that belonged only to me. The screen of my mind faded to black, leaving only the quiet sound of a woman finally breathing free. The most powerful lesson from Nia is Journey, is that family is defined by loyalty and behavior, not just biology. You cannot buy respect, and you certainly cannot purchase love from people who view you only as a resource. Nia spent years minimizing her success to make others comfortable, only to realize she was financing her own destruction. True strength comes when you stop setting yourself on fire to keep ungrateful people warm. Freedom is found in setting boundaries and realizing that walking away from toxicity is an act of survival, not cruelty. Protect your peace and know your worth. If you enjoyed this saga of justice and redemption, hit that follow button for more empowering stories.